You're ready, okay. Good evening and welcome to the January 14th, 2020 Norfolk Planning Board meeting. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is going to be audio and videotape for consumption at home. If it gets to the point in the meeting where we invite audience members to speak, please use a microphone. The microphone is not for those of us in the room. It is for the folks at home who will hear you only if you speak into the microphone. Let's see, I don't see Elizabeth Maitland here tonight yet. Our first item of business is Bristol Pond Estates, and we're anticipating the arrival of Attorney Maitland, but we don't see her at the moment. Yeah, we will cover a couple of other items and wait. All right, let's go down to the new and old business section of the agenda here. The first item is to consider renaming Phillips Way to Shire Drive, which is, both of which are in the Shire Industrial Park. I don't know if we have a map that you can put up there.
Yes.
Amy?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Oh.
There we go, okay.
We have,
All right, so Shire Drive comes up from the left, and, well, it's hard to, yeah, there it is. It comes up, and then that extension is Phillips Way. And, Rich, you want to talk about what the applicant is considering, or requesting, I should say?
this little, not driving too well, but just right here, that section right there,
Yeah,
which is labeled Phillips Way.
yep,
I didn't do a deep historical dive to figure out exactly why they named that little segment as Phillips Way. I will tell you, as you blow back, if you want to just blow, just zoom out, please. I would have chosen to just continue on Shire Drive
yeah,
and not change it over.
right,
And so, essentially, that's the goal here. Is there's two properties on it, 5 and 7 Phillips Way.
yep,
The top piece of property, and there was at one point the thought that would eventually connect to 115, but since the subdivision was built, that particular property that's atop that intersects with Phillips Way will be before you shortly, as part of a site plan which will end the terminus of the street, and then there's other developments that were approved, not yet developed. So the feasibility of extending a road out there is kind of past its opportunity. So the logic would be to just make it Shire Drive, and we would just renumber just assign a new street address. And it came actually before our office by the applicant at 5 Phillips Way, who's came before the board and had a site plan approved. He had indicated that some people had a hard time finding Phillips Way, apparently.
yeah, yeah,
So,
Yeah.
as you can see, there's only 2 properties actually that really are on it. We did run it by. We did hear back from the fire chief. He thought it made sense logically.
yeah,
I don't think we've heard back from the police chief yet, but ultimately, if the planning board thinks it's a worthwhile endeavor, we can make a recommendation to the select board, and then the select board, who are the street commissioners, could then formally go through the process to rename it, and then we would go through with the assessor's department and so forth, and then also the property owners will let them know.
Right.
Now, 7 Phillips Way isn't approved yet. It's before you, so that one's probably a little bit easier to change, but
yeah, understood, right.
that's essentially the idea behind it.
Okay, questions from the board?
Makes sense. What's the adjacent property going up to the left there? There's no
Which
number
one?
on it. There it is.
That one there.
Yeah. It is.
You want to click the eye on that parcel? See the eye?
That property landlocked? Looks like it.
Is that the water tower there? No, the water tower
Yeah,
is,
it's-
the water tower is not there, it's down by the police
What's the
station.
property that's for sale? The guy was in here saying he's trying to sell it with the property.
Yeah, it's
in
owned
front
by the town of
on
Norfolk.
Street.
It says it's conservation land.
Conservation, yeah, okay.
Lynn property, yeah.
Lynn Farm?
I think.
That's what
Yeah.
it is? Okay.
Yeah,
I got it.
so,
All right, any, Chad? Make
questions.
sense?
Makes
Okay.
sense to me.
Okay. So then, given that, the chair will take a recommendation for a motion to recommend to the selectmen that that Phillips Way be renamed to be Shire
Shire Drive.
Shire Drive, yeah, Shire was the last part, Shire Drive.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. All right, I see Elizabeth has arrived, so why don't we go back to our regular agenda? And the first item up on the regular agenda is Bristol Pond Estates. Happy New Year, Elizabeth.
Good evening. I very much apologize. And I'm here for a hearing, a public hearing in reference to the applicant's request.
Is the little green light on? Okay, good.
The applicant's request.
Do we have to read something in? We do?
On this one?
No, you actually, the hearing was open in November 12th. You read it, so this is a continued
I think so.
hearing. Sorry.
Well, there is a,
It's a notice, but it goes back
Notice.
to November.
yeah,
Yeah,
date
it's
back
from
to November, okay,
It was
yep.
read in the,
Understood, okay, fair
Just
enough.
for background.
We'll get it right, please proceed.
No worry at all. I'm on the continuation of the hearing, the public hearing in reference to the applicant Bristol Pond Estates application for a modification to allow for a smaller caliper of tree as required by the town of Norfolk rules and regulations. First of all, I very much apologize for being a bit tardy this evening, and I want to thank all of you, and particularly Mr. McCarthy, for your kindness and your patience with me. In any event, I had submitted back in September correspondence that included a note from the landscaper who installed the trees at Bristol Pond Estates. It was ascertained after those trees were installed that they were 2.5-inch caliper. Norfolk regulations require 3-inch caliper trees to be installed. The note that the installer, Franklin Landscaping, submitted indicated that he knew they were 2.5-inch caliper. However, that was all that was available. It was all that would be available in the foreseeable future. Apparently, that's a particularly popular street tree, and it would have been virtually impossible to obtain a 3-inch caliper tree. It may have taken a year and a half. You'd have to purchase them in advance. They'd have to wait until they grow because nurseries, from what I understand, do not generally carry for the number of trees required 3-inch caliper trees. So that is what happened. I understand the residents were very upset that they were smaller than required by the regs, but the landscaper, in fact, made a unilateral decision, from what I understand, because the developer was pressing him to get these street trees in. As you know, I had been meeting with you since May, and we had promised to get these street trees in. And they were waiting for the conveyance from one of the lots. It finally got sold, and they brought the trees in. I think they were beautifully installed. I think They were done in compliance with the regulations. The only shortfall is, of course, that they are, if I just put this down for a moment, that they are somewhat deficient in the size. I would suggest that for a couple reasons, should allow this modification. First and foremost, the town of Norfolk seems to generally allow this in its subdivisions. And if I could ask Amy, please, put up the street tree pictures. These are pictures, oh, that's sort of cut off a little bit, but that is a tree installed at Ariana Lane that actually shows 2 to 2.5 inch caliper. And then each of these trees that follow is 2.5 inch caliper. And these are all very recent subdivisions that are not quite complete in the town, but none of them are 3-inch caliper. And so we would suggest that they are acceptable, they were planted beautifully, and they will in fact thrive. And if I may, I'd like to, thank you. Just a moment, please, I'm sorry. These chairs are sloped. I had done a bit of research talking about the size of street trees and that sort of thing, and what's a good idea and what's not a good idea. And I would like to submit, and I will give you the board a copy of this. This is an article that's written by Doris Taylor, plant clinic manager at the Morton Arboretum in Illinois, just outside Chicago. And it goes just a couple paragraphs, so if you'd allow me just to read it into the record, I'd be obliged. A young tree may be too small to offer much shade, but it will likely grow faster than a tree planted when it is already large. It takes time for a young tree to grow large enough to create a cool pool of summer shade. Homeowners often think they can rush the process by planting the biggest tree they can find, but that can be an expensive mistake. A large tree is much more costly and less likely to thrive. A smaller, younger tree will be more resilient and more vigorous. Younger trees recover more easily from the transplanting process and start to grow again more rapidly. A larger, older tree will suffer more shock and often will take years to put on much growth. In fact, studies have shown that a tree that is smaller, when it is planted, can usually outgrow a bigger tree in a decade. It will catch up and pass the larger tree. I'm just going to skip a couple of paragraphs. But what it basically says is that a younger tree has the smaller root system. The trees are now grown and sold in large pots that contain the whole root systems. The root systems, when they're planted whole instead of being cut, is a healthier way to plant the trees. So I would suggest that I understand it's not in compliance with the town of Norfolk regulations, but it does appear that the town has just allowed it for whatever reason I don't know, and I'm not going to suggest that I looked at all these subdivisions to see if they submitted a waiver request for the smaller tree, because I have not. But it does appear that the trees that have been permitted to be planted in subdivisions recently in the town are of a smaller caliber than the regulations do require. So for these reasons, I would suggest that and ask the board to accept the waiver request for this modification. We feel, and the other thing I want to suggest as far as toward mitigation, as you are probably well aware, we had done additional planting in the town open space in the front of the subdivision with the agreement of the board and the residents. And due to an error on our part, we planted an additional 8 evergreen trees in that open space that the developer did not go back and take out, though he easily could have after they were planted. So I would suggest that the board suggest and consider that and accept that as mitigation for the deficiency in the planting of the trees. And I will entertain any questions the board might have.
When you go on the internet, you'll find that when you measure a tree caliber, the trunk caliber of a tree, you go 6 inches up from the trunk. Now you got these trees here, and normally when you plant the tree, you've got 6 or 8 inches of direct bloom to protect them. So going way back to our first meeting, I simply suggested if you just give us an invoice from the nursery, not the landscaper, the nursery, showing the caliber of 2.5 to 3, which is what we've always gone by as long as I've been here, and you said that's what they were, I said, that's fine, because it's impossible on the site to measure the tree and get the right dimensions. You're going in to measure the tree diameter, which is a different thing, then you go 4.5 feet up, and there should be a string around that tree to make sure it's level, so that your tape measure is level on that. Point being it's very hard to go on site with a tape measure a tree. All you can really go by, as I said day one, just get it from the nursery, showing the calibers, and that's when I think the applicant said that he was sure they were 2.5 to 3. Well, now we find out they weren't, so, I mean, just a minor point. Just I don't want to beat this horse anymore, you know?
No, I understand, I
That's all.
appreciate that, but that is, that is the situation, and they did go in, and I hope the board will agree that they look beautiful, they were well done. This particular landscaper, I think, enjoys an excellent reputation, and obviously the guarantee will hold, so, I would just ask you to respectfully ask you to please accept those trees and grant our waiver request.
Questions from board?
Nope.
All right. Anyone in the audience care? Yes, sir. Please grab a microphone.
Happy New Year. Charlie Iacono, 18 Bristol Pond Drive. And I just wanted to provide a few points of clarity from the residents' perspective on what has been a long and arduous process for the completion of our subdivision. Attorney Maitland pointed out that there were extra trees planted in the open space following consideration between Rich and some of the residents of the neighborhood. I happened to be one of those residents, and the result of those extra plantings were actually because they were leftover credits from the cul-de-sacs because they did not fulfill the plantings in the cul-de-sacs, and we agreed collectively as all parties that it would be in the best interest not to over-plant in the cul-de-sacs because those would have to be maintained in the future, and those were better suited in the open space. There was a significant amount of historical data around the process and the build of this subdivision. The fact that that open space was actually a no-cut zone in the beginning of the build was an issue that was resolved, and that's why some of the caliper of the trees in the open space were required to fulfill the no-cut zone actions that the developer had taken. In addition to that, there were additional no-cut zone, or to my recollection, at least one no-cut zone that was removed by the developer without prior approval of the planning board or the town because they thought that the trees were dead, but in reality had no bearing to make that call on their own, which has substantially changed the dynamic and the look of two properties that are now adjacent to one another with no natural fencing in that regard. In addition to that, there are a few other issues that remain outstanding with respects to this development. Back in May, we talked about a punch list, specifically around the streetlights. We have yet to see those streetlights, even though we have been shown receipts that those streetlights have been purchased, and the goalpost keeps moving on that one particular item. In addition to that, we know that we have talked at great length over the last 6+ months with respect to additional plantings that are supposedly owed to the residents of the Bristol Pond neighborhood from the developer itself. And we've obviously heeded the advice of the town planning board in saying that that's something that has to be resolved between the developer and the individual property owners. So we're not here before you on that. But the reason that I'm here tonight to represent our neighborhood is the fact that this has not been a smooth transition. There are elements to this process and this project that the developer from the beginning of this project a number of years ago up until today knew they were required to do. And you can cut corners, and I can assure you that they did not cut corners with respect to the houses that they built in that neighborhood. But I would also point out too that there were a number of homes that are in that neighborhood that were built by private builders. And so we're here to implore you tonight to hold them accountable for what was contractually agreed to between the town of Norfolk and the developer in order to build this subdivision. It is unfair to allow these types of instances, whether it's our neighborhood or any other neighborhood, to provide the leeway and the precedent for future builders of this town to come in and not follow those standards. We understand that we certainly don't expect to to a certain degree that those trees are going to come out and new trees are going to go in, because that's just going to further disrupt the completion of the neighborhood. But if that's not the case, we would ask that the town planning committee put some sort of pressure on the developer to settle the outstanding issues of this neighborhood. We cannot continue to allow this to happen. You're not serving in the best interest of the town and the residents if we just give them a pass because there was a confusion of communication between the landscaper and the developer, and the landscaper was forced to put the trees in. There are multiple sides to this story. We have not heard from the landscaper at this meeting, and to take the advice, as much as I appreciate Attorney Maitland's article that she brought from an arborist in the Midwest, that's not the expertise of a local arborist, and it's not the expertise of the landscaper who planted those trees. Without knowing all of the facts, we will never know how this came to be. The only thing that we can assure that can happen is that it's resolved where all parties are equally dissatisfied. We agree, the trees look great. It's going to take a number of years for them to grow. It's going to take a number of years for them to even catch up to the other trees on the side of the neighborhood. But as residents of the town of Norfolk, we enter into a contract with the town to pay our taxes, to be good stewards of the town, and to be good neighbors. We expect and we would hope that when developers come into this town to build future homes for future residents, that they are given that same opportunity and are held to that same level of accountability that we are as residents of this town. We hope that to some degree we can bring this to a resolution where all parties are equally required to sit down at a table and to finally put all these issues at rest. We need closure on this. I'm sure the Nasuti Family Real Estate Trust wants closure on this. I'm sure Attorney Maitland wants closure on this. But the residents want closure on this. And with respects to the lack of streetlights, it's becoming a public safety issue. We have young children in that neighborhood who love to ride their bikes. We need answers and true timelines before something like this can just be given a waiver, because what's next? They may be before you here in 3 months for another waiver. And so if we grant them this waiver without expectations or without some sort of conclusion that there will be substantial movement on these issues, we could be back here again in March and again in May and again, yet again in June and August. And God knows I appreciate all the work that you do, but I'm looking to end my time here at the Norfolk Planning Board meeting. One day I'm sitting on that side of the table. So I would respectfully ask you to really take that into consideration. You're elected by the residents of this town, and you do a wonderful job, and we have a beautiful neighborhood, and we have a beautiful town. And we just want to make sure that everyone is held at the same level of accountability, because God knows I've seen other developers held at a higher level of accountability as well.
We think we understand your point, sir. I think it's disingenuous of you to say that the planning board has not been on the side of the residents. We have been meeting continuously with you and your other neighbors, as well as Attorney Maitland, to attempt to resolve these issues. So please don't think that we're not interested in resolving them.
Absolutely. And I did
That's
not.
fine.
I didn't mean that to come out that way. I recognize that you're working towards that.
Attorney Maitland, can you explain the situation with the streetlights? Because I'm really surprised to hear that they're not installed at this point. The last time we talked about it, they were going to be installed sometime around Thanksgiving, I think.
Yes, frankly, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, I am as well. I just actually found out today that the streetlights were not in. I just sort of assumed that they were, but I have been disconnected quite.
Yeah.
However, this is what I am told. They paid for these streetlights. They were promised over and over again that the streetlights were coming in. We repeated those promises to you. They obviously did not go in.
Yeah.
What Mike told me today was that it is his intention. Obviously, they can't do anything now. The ground is frozen. But they intend to go pick up the lights themselves. And keep in mind that these lights were recommended to the developer by the town. So they sort of went with this guy, but I think it's 3 streetlights, if I'm not mistaken. And they're sort of at the mercy of the company, who said, look, we've got bigger, better things to do. We'll get to you when we get to you. They kept promising. They kept promising. They didn't. It's not something this owner controlled. Do they feel badly about it? Of course they do. But what Mike told me today, that in the spring, if they are not out there straight away, he has made arrangements to pick up, he will make arrangements to pick up the lights, which have been paid for quite some time, and will arrange for them to be installed by someone else. He has given me that assurance today.
As I recall a discussion earlier, there was a request to run the wires and put the foundations in the fall. I don't know whether that happened or not. Rich, do you know whether that happened or not?
I don't know.
No, I was out there a few days ago, and there's no foundations.
Okay. The last thing I know, honestly, was when I submitted this waiver request, attached to that was a diagram. I don't know who prepared that, asking the location of whatever was being proposed to be approved.
Yeah.
Because apparently, as I recall, the owner was told that the town did not want separate boxes put in or something of that nature, that just go ahead and hook it in. We would pay X amount of dollars in until the town accepted the ways, then it would be shifted over to the town. That's how I think they were proceeding. Then at some point in time, the town said, no, we don't want to do that. We want you to put in, and I don't know this terminology, I apologize, to put in separate boxes,
Separate meters.
separate meters, okay.
Yeah.
And that was the last communication I heard. I honestly thought they might have been installed by now, but they're not. But he did assure me today that if Island Lighting, I believe it is, if they can't get to it straight away, he will make other arrangements because they've had his money for a very long time.
Rich, do you have any additional input?
Yes, I do. So the Attorney Maitland's correct. The original, the path they were going down was they were going to they weren't going to be metered at the light,
Yeah.
at the street light. They're going to just be wired directly into the power from EverSource, and then we being the town, once the road was accepted, would just pay. There's a rate that the town pays for each street light.
Right. Yep.
And it did shift courses internally with the town that going forward that we want to have the street lights, and they're doing this over in Fox Run as well, that they are to be metered so that the town is paying exactly for whatever electrical usage the street lights.
When did town make the change, Rich?
This just happened in between these.
So the wiring could have been done anyway. They haven't decided how to wire them.
Yeah.
So the
So nothing could be done.
yeah. So there isn't anything that needs to be dug up. They just need to have EverSource power up. And they need to apply for a new electric service from EverSource as a private developer, not as through the town. Right. So, and then once.
Okay, but you're saying there doesn't have to be any excavation, no trenches?
No. Yes, that's correct. There doesn't.
That's, I don't think what
How's the power gonna get to the lights?
The power. There doesn't need to be any excavations of the road to put the lights in. They're going to come across. I forget exactly how it was, but the power's coming off the pole on Marshall Street and coming across.
Can we stick to what needs to be done and talk about how it gets done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go offline with that because
Yeah.
it's like reading sheet music to a kid, and I don't understand
All
what
right.
you're saying. I'll have someone get in touch with you and make sure this is moving along, but that is his.
Understood. The gentleman in the back row raised that there are several other issues that are still pending between the neighbors and the developer. Are you in a position to help with that at the moment, or?
What are those issues? What are the open issues?
Okay, I'm going to be very frank with you. The issues have to do with plantings between the lots. That we spent a lot of time talking about with individual residents.
If I could jump in real quick,
Yeah.
sorry. Well, I thought we settled that one by saying that was a issue between the developer and the property owners, and it was not a board issue.
Well, apparently, that is not the position, from what I understand
Is
now.
one part of that
I thought
subdivision,
that's what we heard in part of the
Right,
conversation
yeah.
this evening as
is
well.
one part of that subdivision, Aaron, that on the existing plans, there are 2 no-cut zones on the town-owned land, and he took down the trees on those no-cut zones, so in theory, he's responsible to mitigate the no-cut zones, which I'm assuming a buffer between lots. He's required, as far as our jurisdiction, is to replace in some way that cut zone that was all cut down.
Mr. Weddleton, I frankly was not involved at the beginning of this. I've only been involved since
Oh, I
May.
understand,
So I
yeah.
knew nothing about
It came up, you might not have been here at that meeting, but on the plan, there's two areas when they did the initial clearing, they cut down these areas that are on the plan.
This is in the open space?
No,
Oh.
it's just throughout the subdivision. I think there were
Okay.
two spots that really shouldn't have been touched, and they were labeled on the plan on our jurisdiction that were cut. So we're gonna look for some mitigation in those two areas, because that afforded privacy for some of the residents. That's the only thing we had jurisdiction on.
Okay, so it's my understanding, though, that if any trees, this owner is saying they didn't take any trees down. Any trees that were removed would have been taken down by the people who built the lots, developed the homes, put in the systems, that
Well,
sort of thing.
In the end, he's responsible, then, and that would become between him and the owner. If you get a registered part of your plan that says a no-cut zone, unless they died by natural causes, like by overfilling or something, then if one of the neighbors took down, I don't know why they would, where they're providing buffer, but if they did, that would be between those two folks to get those backed up.
But I think, frankly, there might have been some instances because of leaching fields, because houses were not necessarily built where they were shown.
And that could be, that's reasonable when you have
Yeah.
trees that are earmarked to stay, and circumstances come that you can't keep them. That's not uncommon.
But frankly, I'm not aware of what these areas are or what the allegations are. I will be very happy to just
Right here?
If you were to go back to the if you were to go back, I believe it's 3 meetings ago, because there were some breaks and some continuances of the meetings. We discussed this specifically, and I believe, John, you had pointed out to Attorney Maitland that there were areas that were cut in between lots that were actually developed by the Nasuti Family Real Estate Trust. Those homes where those no-cut zones were not developed by some of the private builders. Now, if additional no-cut zones were cut, that's a whole other story. But I know that Ken McNamee is here, and he has one of the pieces of property where that buffer was.
Yeah, I
and
think there's
it
only
was-
two on the plan. If
Yeah,
I can move this, Walter?
Yeah, please,
I
John.
suggest that we vote on this modification and let Rich get together with the parties involved to come up with a punch list, and then let them try to figure out what's left to be done and bring it to us later.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think that's a good suggestion. As I recall, we did go out and walk that area and look at the no-cut zone back in the fall sometime. All right, back to the tree caliper issue.
So the triangle, if you will, the town's at the bottom of the triangle. In this case, is with the trees. Is that while the as we talked, it was quite some time ago. The town did not bond the trees to be put in. It was only the trees that were in the open space and the public way, proposed public way. Once it was that point, the landscape islands. The board, to the regulations, though, there are several subdivisions, this is being one of them, and there are other ones that the board had required in the past, and there are some presently, trees on lots. So there's a connection to the town, and so it's not. I will say yes. The homeowners and the developer need to work it together, but there is a piece that we need to participate to make that happen, because the previous board, approved the plan with trees on them between these lots.
What's before us is a decision as to whether to approve the waiver for,
The waiver for the trees and the path that the.
so I want to,
I understand.
Let's get
I
this
just-
done.
That's apples and oranges, that's right.
so if we deny the waiver request, then the developer may take it upon himself to pull those trees and put in 3-inch caliper trees.
Probably
Right.
next spring, yeah,
I mean,
probably next spring, because you can't do it now.
rather than, I mean, the other feasible conclusion to this is he completes all the other work and comes back in and asks for the waiver request again.
Well, it's entirely possible that the trees that planted are the appropriate caliber. We've never seen the invoice from the tree supplier.
I mean, it's
which-
kind of like Charlie said, it's kind of counterproductive to take out trees that are a little bit short.
I agree.
And in that whole subdivision, a lot of the plantings are excellent. They're large, they're way bigger than required, and your subdivision looks nice. So
I
the
just
other
wanted
part
to
of this
trees
thing, Aaron, was the trail. So the planning board sought to make him put a trail on private property, which I've never heard of. So they're looking for a waiver because the Audubon does not want a trail on their property. So to me,
I think
that's,
we've kind of agreed to that.
that's
Yeah,
kind
we
of
just-
simple,
Right,
so.
so, it just, again, I think we run the risk of, if we deny this waiver, that the developer may pull the trees and put in 3-inch trees that may die, and then this conversation continues, right? So, I mean, that remains a possibility.
Yeah.
I don't think we have the proper information to approve or deny, because first of all, those trees weren't measured properly,
Well, we looked
and
at
we haven't
them,
seen an invoice.
we looked at them, and they look respective of the other areas that you showed. I mean, they all
Right.
look, and some of them are closer to the 3 than the 2. So I think overall, the planting looks really good there, I really do.
Well, I mean, I'd make the statement that it's difficult to approve any waivers to this property when there's still outstanding work to be done. And it's been such a task to try and get the work done.
Well, let's just.
Unless someone here can explain to me why
It
we
just,
would.
it just takes one issue off the table, and we can concentrate on the rest, that's all.
That issue is a point of leverage too, so I would say as.
Sir, you gotta use the microphone. If you're going to speak, you need to
We're
use
talking
the
amongst the
microphone.
board too, and,
Yeah, please.
we still have a big bond there, a real big bond. I mean, we never gave them the money for the road paving, did we?
No, not yet.
I mean, a huge bond there, so that we don't need any leverage, we've got
The,
maybe 150,000 more than we need, so.
I agree with John. It does take one issue off the table.
Well,
And-
the downside to not approving the waiver for the trail is that he goes and puts it in when it's clearly not
But he
wanted.
can't put it in some private property, can't put the trail in.
So then why approve these waivers?
Well, one of them is a technicality because it never should have been done in the first place.
But
That's
By the
trail.
planning board, they never should
But
have,
to the residents' concern,
all the trees.
why, in a world where the developer hasn't provided what he's done, why take any consideration to change the requirements that he was asked to do when?
Well, from
when
my
the site-
perspective, we're moving along, we've come a long way since they first come in when they're not even talking. And as I said, I think the overall aesthetics, landscaping wise, is acceptable and is as good as all the other subdivisions, I really do. That's why I'm doing it. And
And-
focus on the things that are left.
Yeah, and I think that progress has been made since May.
A lot of progress.
A lot of
The board's done a
progress
good
has been
job. I mean, they weren't talking. We've got to come a long way here, so, by going item by item, actually, one thing at a time.
Can I just offer a point of information? And thank you for all of your efforts that you have done and the progress that we have made. The concern of the residents is if this waiver is granted, it is a leverage piece that we lose at the
That's the
negotiation table
Read
to
Read
manage
it.
and facilitate the completion of the remaining items that are still on the punch list. There has been a significant amount of discussion, but since
Totally different.
I think it was
Well, you can
August,
use that.
those discussions and those conversations have ceased. There was a waiver of liability that Attorney Maitland put forward to all the neighborhood, the residents of the neighborhood, that was releasing the Nasuti Family Real Estate Trust from now until the end of time on a number of different issues. We were advised by counsel that we were
not
discussing
relevant.
with that we shouldn't sign those waivers, and then all communication has stopped. There has not been one conversation since that meeting where we were accused of harassing the landscaper in a public forum, which was not the case, that overtures have been made to resolve the planting issue. I would be, as a spokesperson for the neighborhood, fine to say, finish the punch list, come back, and put forth another waiver in 3-4 months when it's the springtime, and we can get there. We're not, again, it's counterproductive, and the trees keep growing, right?
So I guess to just repeat in my words what you just said, it's conceivable that if the other punch list items were complete and these waivers were brought back in front of us after those items were complete, the neighbors might support the approval of these waivers.
The neighbors would support the approval of that waiver if all the items are completed and discussions are coming to a conclusion, so we can still get the plantings in on the plot lines, resolve the issue with the no-cut zones in the spring planting. There is nothing more that we want to have this issue resolved. There is no reason why we can't delay the waiver of those trees. It forces everybody collectively, as a group, to come back to the table and to work together as a group to get resolution to this.
To counter that argument, sir, you have a set of plans that require certain things to be completed by the developer, and those plans have not altered. They remain the de facto set of requirements on the developer. And whether this waiver on the tree caliper gets passed or not, you used to have plenty of leverage. The town has leverage, as Mr. Wetland pointed out, because we're still sitting on a bond. So the chair would entertain a motion to accept the waiver on the tree caliper.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
It passes 3-2.
What about the trail?
Now, yeah, what do we need on the trail, John? Do we need another,
It's all one request.
motion
They
to?
were separated?
Did you separate those?
Well, the motion was separated. I don't
Motion
know.
is separated, yes.
I don't know if the waiver was separated.
Let me take a look here.
I thought it was separated.
I think they asked for two
I think it
waivers.
is.
Yeah.
It was included in this public hearing request, but it was treated separately.
Yeah, it was a separate
Because
item.
we had already
It
been
is-
discussing about the hearing, but we were just going to talk about housing.
Correct, yep.
Second motion.
Yeah, we need a second motion, right? All right, so,
Motion to not require the developer from installing the trail on the Audubon property as per the recorded plans.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
That's to Ms. Brady, the record, the documents. that I-
Sure, certainly.
So Rich,
We
you'll
hope
have to meet
that,
with these
before you
folks.
leave, we hope that you will continue to work with the neighborhood representatives and resolve the remaining issues as best you can, for their sake and for the sake of the town. Thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda is 7 Phillips Way, site plan, special permits, stormwater management, and earth removal permits. I believe we have one to read in, do we not?
Yes.
All right, Gary?
Notice is hereby given in accordance with Mass General Law, Section 40A, and the Norfolk zoning bylaws, Section F11. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, at 7:15 PM in Room 124 at the Norfolk Town Hall, 1 Liberty Lane, Norfolk, Mass., regarding a site plan application for property located at 7 Phillips Way, Lot 14B, Shire Industrial Park in Norfolk, Mass. The applicant, AA and JB Realty LLC of Rentham, Massachusetts, is proposing construction of a 7,200 square foot commercial building with associated parking, utilities, and grading as depicted on provided plans. The applicant is also requesting an earth removal permit, stormwater management permit, and special permit to allow outdoor storage facility exceeding 1,000 square feet. The property is located in the C-1B zoning district, reference assessors map 18, block 69, lot 41-12. The plan and application are available for public inspection in the office of the Norfolk Planning Board during the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Thursday.
Thank you, Gary. Before we get started, Rich, just a follow-up to that earlier discussion we had at the beginning of the meeting. We will look to have you advise the selectmen that we recommend that they
Yes. So
name it.
we'll prepare a letter on behalf of the
Yeah,
board
okay,
to send
good.
to the board of
Yep,
selectmen.
all right, sir, thank you.
United Consultants. As previously stated, this is for site plan development at what is now known as 7 Phillips Way, but may be changing. Basically, it's comprised of 2 lots. This one being part of the Shia Park subdivision, and this being another parcel that they have purchased from an abutter. Nope, back one. This is the existing conditions. Basically, the tree line comes down here, here, and here, so this is currently all wooded. There's currently a building across the street that was started, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 years ago, and it's just been sitting. So that's all cleared right to the edge of Phillips Way. This would be the site layout plan. The building, 7,200 square foot building, would be in this area here. Parking on 2 sides. And then we had a previous meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we were planning to store some equipment outside. It came up through comments from the butter that should be in a paved area. So we've added this area here for the equipment to be parked. There's a list of the equipment here, the size of the equipment, and the size of the parking space that we have for it. There'll be roughly 4 or 5 stockpiles in the back. Materials that are going to be stored are basically loam, sand, rice stone, some root zone mix, and infill mix. So all of those are natural granular soils, aggregates, and there will be no chrome rubber or any type of synthetic field materials stored on the site. Mr. Brolin does not like artificial fields and refuses to do them. So we would be paving Phillips Way up to this area here, 26 feet wide, to match the other roads within the park. That would provide access to the building. And then for the heavy trucks and heavy equipment, off the end of the pavement, we would have a recycled asphalt roadway. And then in discussions yesterday with Rich and Beta, we've added a crushed stone equipment access to the stockpile areas because this whole area is intended to be a turf lawn. So that came up in discussion yesterday. I added it to the plans. And then we have a little turnaround / loading area around each of the stockpiles, so that should afford them enough room. We have a sediment forebay down in this area here, because when we get to the grading plan, this whole thing is pitching this way. A proposed detention pond, and then currently along the back of probably 5 or 6 lots, there's a 40-foot wide easement for I forget the term they used, a rain garden or whatnot. I had talked to Janet a year or so about it, and she said no, because it was made part of the drainage system. It would not be considered a wetland. And then that was supposed to continue across here. You can see that somebody got a little overzealous, and we have basically a pond there. So rather than going to fill that in, we're just going to leave that the way it is, and then the outfall from our pond will go into that, the way everything else goes. Again, it kind of, because of that bump out, it kind of squashed us into the front of the lot to get everything done that we had to do. The other thing that came up in discussion yesterday, there will be a 6-foot high chain link fence around the perimeter with the mesh screening on it to provide the screening. When we get to the landscaping plan, we do have some evergreens here to shade them from there. And then there'll be a chain link fence around the sediment forebay and the pond, so that there won't be any issues with people or children or whatever.
There's a gate at the crushed stone road there, right?
Yeah, there'll be a gate right here, pretty much at the end of the pavement. Okay, that will be closed except for when they need access to the property.
You mentioned a turf field. Is it, you intend to scoop and sell turf? Roll it up and sell it?
No, he has a place down in Carver where he grows some of the specialized turf that he needs, just regular, turf
Yeah.
they get in trailer loads.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know if anybody had a chance to read the narrative. Sports Turf Specialties is going to be the person occupying this site. They currently have their main office over in Kenneth Minor Drive and another yard over at the end of Cushing Drive, where they actually process some of their materials. They have a building that they do infield mix to Major League Baseball specifications. They basically do high-end field. They do a lot of work around the country on professional sports teams, baseball and football. A lot of the high schools and stuff around here. So that's their main business. And he's just looking for another site to stockpile some material and another place that 2 or 3 of his crews can work out of.
You mentioned going in front of the ZBA. Have you got the ZBA blessing that you're looking for?
We're back before them tomorrow night. Okay, I believe that I have addressed the couple of concerns that they had. So again, we met with them, and then we're meeting with them tomorrow night.
Fair enough.
Jim, that section of road you're building on, Phillips Way now,
Yeah.
is that gonna be a town-accepted part of the road?
What is the status of
is that on
Phillips /
private
Shire?
Well, so, that's a good question. The Shire and Sharon Ave, the town pulled the bond, so actually, they went in foreclosure, as you know, so the town is holding money and needs to complete it. That little segment there, it's a good question whether it needs to be.
But this isn't on your lot, that segment, correct? Jim?
No, that's a separate parcel.
No,
The roadway
this
itself?
is actually my frontage.
Oh, it is?
But currently,
Yeah.
if you're familiar with the park,
Yeah.
it comes up and it ends at the cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
right in front of Mr. Pantonio's site. So what we're gonna be doing is coming off the cul-de-sac and extending it to this point here to provide access to our lot.
I would think that would end up being a town accepted road. I mean, it's on town property, right?
I think the town, well, it's good. We're gonna need to have a discussion with DPW about it, because it's not, the way it's laid out, the layout just continues and dives at the end of the property. There's no turnaround. It's not exactly,
You have building frontage for that other building, correct?
yeah.
Yeah, again, that building was, so I believe they were using Phillips Way for their frontage as well. But the only thing was they were, I don't wanna say kinda cagey about it, but here's where their driveway came in,
Yeah, that was a temporary thing.
right off the end of the
So the
cul-de-sac,
town would have to
so.
accept that, just to make sure those people owned the frontage.
Yeah, we need, step one is change it to Shire Road and then
Yeah.
Shire Drive.
That's the
And
easy part.
step two is to kind of sort through this issue, because
Okay,
there's,
understood.
Okay.
We will work it through offline. Other questions from board members here? Aaron, anything? John?
So how much are you storing outside?
Off the top of my head, the largest of any of those stockpiles would probably be 500, 600 yards.
And what's the storage outside requirement on this section of zoning?
so they have applied for a,
Special permit?
they've applied for a special permit.
You did.
To store more than 1,000,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Large trees.
So like I said, we had originally received a review letter from Beta I've been working on revisions based on their comments. We did have a meeting yesterday where we went through the letter with the bunch of us, and again, based on yesterday's conversation, I had a chance to make some of the changes, but we're still in the process of working that through, and I've been saving the drainage for last.
All right. Any reason to believe that those issues won't get resolved the next time you guys get together?
No, I don't think I think the issues that we probably need to work through are related to that right away.
Right away, okay.
And how much is the developer gonna be required to meet the standards, and/or are they gonna request waivers? So,
Now,
both, the size, the width, the sidewalk, the trees, the cul-de-sac, all those things need to be included in the design
Yeah,
and/or
agreed.
waived.
Do you guys have any elevations on the building yet?
I've asked Mr. Brolin for them. I believe he's intending to use the same building he did over at Cushing. But we will get plans in.
I think this is, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, so you don't have the elevations yet, so design review is gonna take a look at this Thursday? I think, is this on the agenda for design review board?
Not sure.
Not sure?
I
All right.
saw the meeting come up, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I would,
Well, we don't have plans.
no, if you don't have elevation, so is he forthcoming with those shortly, do you know?
Be on the phone with him tomorrow morning
Yeah,
again to
that
find out
way,
where they are.
I believe the only agenda item for those is the
Design guidelines, okay, all right. Well, then, as soon as they come in, then hopefully we can get them out to design review, to schedule a meeting to review them.
Now, I did send over a revised list of waivers based on yesterday's conversation. I don't know if you-
Yeah, I've looked at those.
Okay,
My personal reaction is that, let's see, 1,
When did they come
2,
in? When did they come in?
about 4 o'clock this afternoon, Phil.
Oh, okay. Well, I missed that one.
Tell me, on number 6, it's a small point, but it's about bounds. You want a waiver to not tie to the bounds. Why is that?
The nearest town and county bounds are all the way out onto 1A
Okay.
someplace, and I believe we requested that waiver when we did 5 Phillips, and were granted the waiver.
So we did talk about this requirement and regulation? The engineer and your engineer and
Yeah.
so it's kind of, the way the site plan regs, there's a lot of requirements that got ported over from the subdivision regs.
Yeah.
And we talked about maybe the higher level significance to tie it in related to a subdivision, but with these site plans, maybe it's not as critical, and you can
Well,
jump in as you will.
You would
Yeah.
think that there'd be a
So not surveyors. I don't know.
bound or something that had been established up within the subdivision years ago, somewhere that you could tie to, that itself would relate back to the city and county bound.
Well, as I just said a few moments ago, this went through bankruptcy. The town ended
Yeah.
up having to finish the project, so I can't really
Okay,
assure you.
understood, all right.
But this would be, a portion of it is a subdivision
Yes,
improvement,
yes,
so
yeah.
it's kind of it's not quite the same as 5 Phillips Way
Or
or,
harder is to tie to the
Right.
town events.
right.
It's a survey, right?
Say that again?
It's a survey.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all we're talking about.
Yeah. Have you looked at this list, Rich?
I did.
Do you have any issues or any comments that you want to make? Give them some guidance before,
Yeah, let me go back to this. I think,
taking a look at it. Yeah, I think so too.
yeah. I think, so as far as the lighting goes, we're gonna approach is similar we had before to have the lighting that are actually shown on the plan. There's not.
Yes, they are.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's not, I wouldn't necessarily,
So you can see, we've got lights here, here. And you can see the lighting will
waiver list is at the end.
pretty much illuminate all of the parking and whatnot around the building.
considering the location, the fixture type, and the design, it seems reasonable, that particular waiver. And we have, the board has done that on a couple of the other sites within the park.
Mhm.
I think the larger, so the bigger jump out items are the impact, the traffic study, and, actually, that's the only other one, and then the impact
Can I
study.
just jump in, Rich, real quick?
Sure,
So are we
yeah.
are we heading towards a place where we're going to be asked to vote on something we received at 4 o'clock today?
No,
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 no, I haven't completed
no, we're not.
Beta's initial review, so I know this is getting continued tonight.
So
Yeah.
we don't really need to go through these one by one.
well, I think the only,
You're giving some guidance, that's
the
all.
indulgence is if you see something there that, whoa, I don't think I'm comfortable with.
Now's the time to tell.
Now's the time, and then they can address it, more or less, so.
But we got this at 4 o'clock today. So I
Alright.
think it's reasonable to assume that we'll comment on it after we get a chance to take a look at it and think about it, right?
There's 5 emails in the last hour.
Yeah.
Right? You can always count on that.
I think you gotta add a waiver of the cul-de-sac.
Again, we're not subdividing it. We're just building a lot on a previously approved
Yep.
subdivision. So, I have no control to put a cul-de-sac. I would have control to put an easement on my property, but I have no control to put an easement on property across the street, like the cul-de-sac that's currently existing. Right now, that cul-de-sac that's there is in a temporary easement. The road itself comes through.
I think because you got you need frontage off that road, so that's gonna be at least a private road. I think you gotta at least request the waiver of having a dead end road with no turnaround.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
at a minimum.
Rich, that last building we put on this dead end, I think it was for U-Haul or something. Did we make them put in a temporary turnaround for people coming down in case they had to turn around? I vaguely remember that.
U-Haul's in the next section on 5 Phillips, so they're actually,
And I thought they had no road.
no, they
cul-de-sac.
actually, if you wanna,
Some of them we made them, one person made them put a temporary
I
turnaround
guess
in.
if you go back to the GIS, you can see that.
Just don't know what the end of that.
There's a landscape island that 5 Phillips is off.
Just seems over.
Who's the only way to get access to that piece of property? It's just interesting that they're not accessing that piece of property by using it. They're really using it for access to this piece of property.
So see, 5,
Phillips
But
goes
this
straight
property-
through, and then this is in a temporary easement.
That's why they combined.
yeah, so we're gonna have to,
Yeah, that's gonna be worked. All right, okay.
Motion
Any-
to continue.
Any other points from the board?
Sidewalks. So you're looking for a waiver of the sidewalks. We had a discussion about that recently.
We did.
And so would that waiver include funding this, adding?
Most likely it would. If we grant the waiver, we would expect a contribution to the sidewalk fund. I think it's fair to say that we haven't established what we want yet in terms of so many dollars per foot of frontage or whatever. So we need to work on that as a board
Right.
and give them guidance. But yes, we would be looking for something.
Is there a sidewalk up there now, Rich? One sidewalk up at Shia Park?
there's
John,
one,
the
yeah.
sidewalk
Goes up,
apparently comes up here
Yeah.
and ends right about here.
Right.
Okay.
I don't
Yep.
believe there's any sidewalks on this side of the street.
I don't think there is either, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Anyone in the audience care to comment on 7 Phillips? All right, well, thank you, Jim, and we'll entertain a motion to continue this until February 11th at,
What time?
what time?
7:15 maybe?
7:15.
7 o'clock.
7:15, right, okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye of the continuance. Aye. It is continued. See you next
very
month. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, who made the motion?
Aaron so moved it, I think.
I believe he did. Next item is 6 Hill Street. Site plan, special permit for outdoor storage, stormwater and earth removal permits. Continued from the 10th of December.
It'll be finished up by 9, right? 10 a.m.
Is this what we're gonna discuss? Layout? We're gonna discuss this layout?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
I think you could be opening your pool up by the 1st of April, is that true? Good time to make up. The kids will do it. They'll swim. Keep that open, will you? Keep that open?
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Ted Cannon on behalf of the applicant, Nat Hunter, along with Ted Lezanga and Larry Tilton from Tilton Associates. Town planner sent me a sort of an agenda tonight, Mr. Chairman, if you want to follow through along
Sure.
those lines, that's fine with me.
Sure.
So, the first up, I know that the board was concerned there was some confusion in the assessor's office with the history of the lot and
There was.
plans that had been recorded, so there was a request to record an updated A&R plan to clarify all that, which we have done. So I don't know if Beta's had a chance to look at that, or if the board's prepared to address that tonight. Certainly would be happy to take that up if the board's prepared. If not, I understand the application didn't come in too long ago.
Rich?
Yeah, I think Beta hasn't had a chance to review it, but that's okay. I think we should at least present it so the public gets the opportunity to see it.
Yep.
That's an important piece of this. So, oh, it's not on. Is it on your thumb drive, Ted?
No, that's this.
Yes.
These are.
Very first one.
Can't seem to get there.
Is it the equipment plan or the?
No.
I'm not sure you have it electronically. I have a paper copy.
Well, we saw it. It was there.
Yeah.
Back one.
There you go. All right, why don't you speak to the key elements of that, Ted?
Essentially, it's, okay, yeah, perfect, okay. So, the outline of the residential lot is here, the outline of the commercial lot is here. Those are the current lines of ownership. Both of those lots have sufficient frontage, so there's no subdivision. They don't fall under the subdivision control law. So we're happy to accommodate the town. Hopefully this will clear up the assessor's records, and we'll put this on record to identify the two lots that have been in existence for many, many years.
Okay. This has been filed with Rich and the town here. Is it recorded as well?
No, we would.
No, it
we
was
would-
filed
we
last
would-
Thursday.
Yeah, so if, assuming the planning board signs it, then we would take it down and record it, get a copy of the recorded information to the assessor.
Okay, thank you. Keep going.
Okay. Next is the waivers. So Ted and Larry, if you would mind, waivers shown on the cover sheet, and there's one other that we'll have to add to the cover sheet that I.
Need your glasses.
Which ones?
I'm just kidding. They work.
Special permit?
That's some serious stuff. Blow it up.
It's down the lower left corner there, right?
Lower left corner.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
So just to go over the planning board waivers, Ted Leisinger from Tilton Associates. So requesting 3.3.2.21 impact studies and assessments. Our request is not to submit the impact assessment for the report. Section.
You want to do these one at a time, or you want to read them all?
Sorry if I read them all, or?
You speak up a little louder, we can't hear you back there.
Okay.
Read them all.
Yep. So I'm gonna go through the
Read
list.
them all, sure,
All right.
then we'll deal
Section
with them.
3.3.2.21, impact studies and assessments, and we're requesting to not submit an impact study and assessment. Section 5.2.8, slant slope granite curbing, we're requesting to allow Cape Cod berm and bituminous berm curbing in lieu of the slope granite. Section 5.3.3.1 is catch basins, and we're requesting to allow catch basins with a 4-foot inside diameter and a gutter. Section 7.4.2 is the scale, just to allow the site plan at a scale of 30 feet to an inch. Section 7.4.3.7 is the North Geodetic Vertical Datum of NGVD 1929. We're requesting to allow site plans beyond National American Vertical Datum of 88. Section 7.5.2 is a traffic study, and we're asking a request for not to require a traffic study for this project. Section 8.5.4.12, sidewalks on existing roadways. We're asking to waive the construction of a sidewalk along existing roadway. And another variance request on a letter we submitted to the board on December 31st. We're asking a waiver for under planning board J.4.B.1.A, sufficient screening for sufficient screening. All right.
Actually, if I may, Mr. Chairman, on that particular item, the bylaw requires.
That's not for here, that's for TV.
The bylaw requires that the screening be on the commercially used lot But presently, there's quite a bit of screening and a huge elevation difference on the residentially used lot. So the effective screening that the bylaw is trying to accomplish is already in place. And the waiver that we're asking for is to not require that it be on the commercially used lot. We would be fine with a condition to require a perpetual easement to maintain that screening on the residentially used lot. It's just the topography, all that lends itself to an existing screen now that's great, along with the existing fence that's there. So we're not asking to remove the screening, we're asking to be able to use the existing screening that's in place.
We'll talk about that more when we get to look at the drawings, actually.
I just wanted the board to understand what that
Yeah,
request
all right,
was.
fair enough. Okay, let's take these one at a time. The first one there on the impact study, what's the opinion of the board members on that?
All right, I'll bite. This setup here with all this heavy equipment in the residential area with a road that's 18 feet wide, with not a legal site distance issue, I guess we haven't studied. I think it warrants an impact study. I just think that the impact study was made for a project like this, where you're gonna be putting in a different operation in the middle of a bunch of residences, that's all.
Yeah, I couldn't agree.
That's my opinion.
I couldn't agree more, John. I think this just screams for an impact study. It is in a commercial area. It's not a residential area. It's a commercial area in which residences are allowed. But nevertheless, there are a significant number of residences within a very short radius here. So I think the board is, well, I think I would vote for an impact study. I don't know about the other members of the board, so that would be up to them. But anyway, that's my feeling on that. The next one is the slope granite versus the Cape Cod berm. I think that's been an issue that we have accepted readily in many developments and probably would grant that waiver. Next one, I defer to Beta on that in terms of the catch basin.
Yeah, that's not an issue. You may have a gutter inlet may not work if it's not, are they all catch basins against the gutter pavement area? If you're going with a Cape Cod berm, a gutter inlet, you'd have to have a transition and so.
But it's workable.
Yeah.
It's workable, all right. The next one, again, Rich, I'd defer to you.
The plan scale.
Yeah, plan scale, I'd defer to you on that. I think we've done that before, but
Why the request?
it's usually
Just
20
fit.
foot.
Just to fit, okay.
Yeah,
That's understandable.
yeah, it is. Next one has to do with the datum again, right? So I have to defer to you guys on that. See what you think.
Yeah, that's whatever the town datum is, right? I would assume that they want them on town datum to be able to match.
So I think what I can do is report back to the board
Mhm.
on what the town uses and then let you.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough, right, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. The next one is the traffic study, which really should be part of the impact study. They go hand in hand. And I can't read the last one, I have to stand up.
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks, yeah. We have established a policy that says if we do indeed grant a waiver for a sidewalk, which in this case may be the case, we would expect a contribution to the town's sidewalk fund, the equivalent thereof, and we will provide some guidance as to what that might be in the near future. We don't have that guidance available to us at the moment. So there's some feedback for you. The rest of the board can chime in and see if they agree with those points that I've raised, or would prefer to do something different.
And just as a reminder, Mr. Chairman, there was the one other waiver about the location of the screening.
Yeah, that was, say it again, the
Sure. Yep, so the bylaw requires that the screening, when a commercial use abuts a residential use, that there be screening between the two, and that the screening be maintained.
Well, let's put this drawing up so that we can all see it, and we can talk to that.
Yeah, that one.
This one?
No, I mean,
She'll do it
that
electronically.
one is.
This is the one here, right?
This could work, yeah.
Okay, so you can point to where you're referring to, Ted, on the,
This one okay to use or not?
Yeah, that works.
I'll zoom in.
Let's see.
Existing conditions plan, you'll see this fence, it's right along here. That's the one they're talking about. Second sheet. There you go, this one right here. This is the residential lot. This is the commercial lot. There's an existing fence that goes around the commercial, then crosses over into the residential, runs along the residential, and then comes back into the commercial in the gated situation that's right there today, so. This is the,
all right, so if I heard you correctly, you're saying that on the residential lot at the moment is some screening that you propose to
existing
leave.
6-foot chain link fence.
Yeah,
In addition, could you take them through the elevation? There's a pretty big elevation change there.
Yes, this, at this grade, I don't, if you have the loaded up, this is around 219 up here on the flat where the paving is. Then there's a side slope, and the chain link fence is right along the edge of the top of slope.
Section.
And then it slopes down to this stone retaining wall here and here.
Right.
Then you have the backyard of this residential house, so.
right.
Right along the top of
first
slope,
one is-
more or less, is the existing chain link fence. And that goes around this way.
And the vegetation in that area?
This is a vegetated side slope. Then you have the existing vegetation on the back of the fence, a chain link, 6 foot, and then it comes here and then runs right along this reinforced riprap slope, then to the street, and then back around the front of the property.
Now, that, on the fence on the commercial lot is not the one that's going to ultimately be there, right? You're going to change the location of that fence because you're using more of the square footage for the commercial property, right?
In the proposed changes, the chain link fence is starting at the street and then runs kind of south to the rear property line,
Yeah.
will be relocated from that point more or less along generally the property line to the rear,
Yeah,
and then it'll be moved to the western property line, and then come to here, back up the property line where the residential and commercial connect up to the existing fence, allow this one to stay, then this one this front one gets taken down.
yeah,
This gate here that's right here today will be moved back
yeah.
to this location in line with the face of the building, so that this front gets opened up. And
So why are
Then
we
you'll
asking
see-
for a waiver for something that already exists?
this area.
The bylaw, J4B1A, requires that when you have a commercial use lot that abuts a residential use lot, that you have to have a 25-foot screening that has to be maintained on the commercial use lot. And so that would require that the screening come along this area here. And, you know, the existing conditions out there, there's excellent screening between the house and the commercial building now. And so that bylaw also contains, it gives this board the power to waive the requirement if the board feels that in effect there's sufficient screening to meet the intent of the bylaw, which I would suggest there is.
And, excuse me, in that set of plans, you'll see we are going to place on this existing fence a screen cloth, more or less visual screen, so you won't be able to see through the chain link. So you'll have the
some.
Line of sight will be interrupted via a screening.
Zoning talks about a setback, the separation distance between lots, not about a screen per se.
Yeah, there's a section for screening between different zones. A 30-foot,
Yeah.
is it a 30-foot green belt?
Yes.
Yep.
25,
Yep.
Well, J4B1A is lots that abut a property with a residentially occupied building shall provide on the commercially used lot a green belt buffer of evergreen trees or shrubs along the property line in a single row. Trees shall not be less than 6 feet in height at the time of planting, be located 6 feet on center and continuously maintained.
So we're gonna have a fence there instead.
Have a minimum depth of the shared property line of 30 feet. The bylaw goes on to say, in those circumstances where an effective screen of existing plantings already provides an appropriate buffer, the planning board has discretion during the site approval process to waive strict compliance with
fence by the street.
J4B1A.
It's being moved to here. It's right along the property line.
He's moving it back.
Give me the reference again, would you, Ted?
J4B1A.
B1A, okay, yep,
And the waiver language is on the second page.
yep,
Page 129,
yep.
first full paragraph at the top.
Well, the long and short of it is, given the neighborhood concerns, we're gonna have to take this one into consideration. Right?
Now, you were mentioning that the screening, you're only talking about the screening for that one property, but is it not true that on the south end, those are residential as well? Or no? Assuming this is south down here, I mean, so this is residential, right? Commercial, are these? That's a vacant lot. That's, but is this residential or commercial? Right. Okay.
It says specifically residential. This is commercial, it's just in residential here.
That's right. It's residential, but it's in a commercial zone. Right. So, but the other lots are vacant.
Yeah, it's vacant.
Okay.
That's the side where you have, or you're asking for all of this outside storage, right?
No. No, it's on the opposite side. It's on this side.
No, you've got, on the right side of that building.
All these blue boxes here?
You're gonna put this,
We can get to another page on that.
fair enough, but I mean, there is storage out there to the right side of the building.
Absolutely. I misunderstood John's question. I
No,
thought-
all this blue storage here, you get about 40 blue boxes that contain different things.
Right.
So are you sure that the fence is adequate to block all of this?
Yes.
And the second thing is
This is
got-
commercial, this is commercial.
you've got the equipment area number 3, and you've got the paver area, which I'm assuming the equipment activity will be. I have a question on the storage calculation that you did, but what adds to the question of the buffer, to me anyway, is you're gonna have, I'm assuming you're gonna have activity on this side of the building.
There'll be some storage, correct.
So that's why, personally, I'd probably wanna go out and do a site visit and take a look and see if,
Correct. Right. Yeah, so, yeah, that side doesn't abut a residential.
years ago, we took a lot of different site walks. I'd like to do one there and just be at the place on the lot line and be next door and see. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and all of this activity, incidentally, on this equipment storage, you've got 1,420 feet, which is a 180-foot building times 8 feet, but yet you get stuff bumping out 10 feet, so I think you're gonna have to go back and recalculate your storage area calculations, because they don't seem to work for me. And the question would be, if you're gonna be operating in this equipment area here, with this equipment that's stored here, plows and things like that,
I know, but that's,
well, it's all to do with the screenage. If you're gonna have storage here and activity here, is there a need to just have a chain link fence, or should we have more of a buffer? And I would know once I walked out and took a look myself. That's all.
I think a site visit would be extremely helpful.
I do too.
It's a huge up gradient there, so
And that maybe, yeah.
it goes way up, and then the fence sits on top of that.
And the adjacent property is commercial.
Commercial, so it's, on this side, it doesn't abut a residential use.
Okay, that all helps.
Exactly. And that's the difference between the two sides.
Okay.
Okay, you want to back to that agenda that Rich
Keep
provided?
going, sure,
Keep
absolutely.
going?
And we will, when, on a revised plan, add that last waiver request to the
Right.
cover sheet, because we didn't
Understood.
have that on the last one.
Understood, right, okay.
Mr. Chairman, we didn't hear I know you, Mr. Wilton, spoke about the rest of the board on,
Board members are free to speak up and tell me what they think, or tell the audience what they think.
well, and let me just say this, is that you have a letter that's part of the packet that was prepared by the abutters. And, if the ultimate decision, the planning board is to require those impact reports on both sides of it, some of the questions that have been raised in that letter would come out of an impact report. So that's why I'm just
Right,
get a sense of
sure.
those two pieces.
Gentlemen,
I think an impact study and a traffic study would be warranted. The slope granite curbing, we
yeah,
talked about that before. I have no problem waiving that. Catch basins sound fine to waive that. The plan scale, doesn't seem a problem to waive that. The vertical datum, you're gonna look at what does the town use. And then we talked about the sidewalks on how to waive that and what sort of compensation the town would want for that. We don't have those
right, but we'll work on that.
details as of
Right.
today. And then the screening, I personally don't see a problem with the screening, but I do think a site walk would be warranted to go
Agreed.
through it.
Agreed, yeah, agreed.
So,
I guess on the screening, I'm just not sure of the language without reading it myself, so I guess I would defer to Phil. I didn't know if, it didn't sound like it could, the screening could be moved completely onto the residential property.
Well,
And it doesn't, I guess it doesn't have to be answered yet tonight, we're voting on it. Aside from that, I guess I'd be in agreement with the impact study and the traffic study. I think we were planning to waive everything else. Perhaps still just need some clarity on the screening part.
Did you folks do a quick check on the site distance requirements? Does that meet
Yes.
the laws on site distance? It does.
We had the site plan for this gate location.
Yeah,
And if you recall, at the beginning of the site plan hearing process,
yeah.
the site distances were questioned. We turned in the plan showing the site distance in both directions.
Mhm.
And that was part of the recommendation, that we clear the vegetation on the low end here and move this fence back to the line of the building and clear this vegetation here so that when you hit, the site distance is met in both directions. Because
This-
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, about 30 mile an hour traffic? 25, so we calculated that. You have a plan here that's been reviewed.
Just a question, when you get the parameters for doing a site distance check, does it matter that heavy equipment on long trailers is gonna be going in and out of here as compared to regular vehicles?
Site distance is site distance.
But I mean,
You just have to be, if you're coming out with an 18-wheeler, you're higher up, but it's still measured at the same spot, same location.
Aaron, any,
Nothing to add.
anything you'd like to add? No?
No.
Okay. All right, how many other items did Rich provide you with there?
He had talked about feedback on the new plan, but I know Beta hasn't even had a chance to look at that yet.
Right.
And then my thought is, if the board's going to require an impact study, which will have a traffic component, I know the abutters had submitted a letter that the board wanted some feedback on. I think it's probably wise to wait till we have the impact study, which I think will address a number of those, and then once we have that, go through that letter and make sure that the board is satisfied with the results.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think it's appropriate time to open it up for questions from the audience or comments from the audience.
Is it okay? Yeah, it's fine.
Bonnie McLaughlin, 9 Hill Street. I represent a group of concerned citizens of Pondville community, and there are 3 of us that plan to speak this evening regarding our shared goals in under a few minutes each, and appreciate your consideration. As you know and have mentioned, we've submitted a detailed letter to the Planning Board January 9th, which provides more specifics than I will address here tonight. However, after reviewing the most up-to-date information provided in the December site plan and Tilton correspondence, we do find there remain a number of unanswered questions and outstanding concerns, primarily and succinctly as follows, some of which we have discussed this evening. The deed for 6 Hill Street appears unresolved, impacting the square footage and possibly requiring an entirely new site plan in F11. The reclassification of the operations from a contractor's headquarters to commercial services, and whether the business truly meets this criteria, is questionable. To date, there has been no cooperation with regard to or efforts to mitigate potential adverse environmental impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods, such as noise, particularly off hours, traffic and road maintenance, water protection for both wetlands and private residential wells based upon both storm drainage management as well as salt and other materials on site, the clear cutting of trees and elimination of natural barriers to surrounding properties, coupled with minimal efforts to provide the visual screening. And finally, the applicant has shown a lack of follow-up for data previously requested by both the board as well as residents in prior meetings. We therefore would like to request that certain conditions be considered, which I believe Jennifer would like to speak to now.
Again, we will try to be brief. I might be the longest of the 3. My name's Jennifer Schwalbe. I'm at 58 Everett Street, and again, I speak on behalf of the abutters and neighborhood residents. Given the concerns Bonnie listed, we have conditions we find both critical and fair to be considered and included in any approval you choose to grant to the applicant. We ask that these conditions be considered to put in writing on any special permits granted or plans approved should this project move forward. First, regarding storage and vehicles, the applicant's description of his business is more conducive to contractors' headquarters, in our opinion, not commercial services, and we believe should therefore be required to follow the bylaw to store his equipment and vehicles inside. If for some reason this board disagrees and decides the applicant's snowplow and landscape construction business can be considered commercial services, and this board allows the outdoor storage beyond 1,000 square foot bylaw, then we ask that you put some limit on the storage and follow the bylaw that the storage area be separately screened. Right now, that would be similar to something like colonial fencing, where their storage is separate from the front. Right now, the plan is, as discussed, to have the screen around the entire property. And right now, that feels a bit like we have a huge property that could be packed to the max with industrial vehicles with no upper limit. That seems a little a big concern to us. In addition, if they're allowed more than 3 commercial vehicles, again, we ask that you place a limit on that. We feel this is critical because we see the number of vehicles and equipment have increased considerably from the first time the applicant came before the board up until the last meeting in November. Our second request is that business activities and hours of operations, that the planning board not allow activity related to truck loading, salt transfer, or outdoor equipment to occur overnight. At night, the level of noise in our neighborhood is very low. As a parent of young children, the prospect of having a business with overnight activities, waking us or our children up, is unacceptable to us as well as the residents I speak for. I don't know if we've addressed the issue of tenants, but if he does consider to still have tenants, to limit the number and types of tenants that can operate, and let those tenants' vehicle and equipment needs be kept within the parameters of the vehicle storage requirements, not additive to his plan. We ask, fourth, that the size of the asphalt expansion in the rear be reduced. Right now, the plan is to cut all the way back to the property line, eliminating the existing tree buffer, and we ask you please consider a less aggressive cut line that preserves a natural tree and sound buffer on the property. Since noise is a significant concern, that would help to contain the noise. And then finally, We appreciate the interest in an impact and traffic study. We also requested noise and pollution study be done in accordance with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. They do have regulations pertaining to noise. And given that there's equipment and activities generating noise, air pollution, we ask that that be considered. Those regulations identify noise as a pollutant, and it does apply to commercial sites where residential homes are within proximity. We've given you some of that information in the document we gave. So finally, in closing, placing an outdoor business surrounded by residents that has the potential to operate overnight with commercial vehicles and loaders is a huge concern to us. And if a business like this is to operate in our neighborhood, there must be some conditions placed on them. Thank you.
My name is Elizabeth Whitney, 26 Valley Street, Farmville. Been a resident with my husband and daughter for 38 years. Our group certainly favors commercial, industrial, and business development in the town of Norfolk, but in the appropriate areas, not, we feel, in the middle of established neighborhoods. We fully realize that significant resources and personal time and effort have been invested already in pursuit of a special permit for 6 Hill Street in Pondville. Speaking for myself, I can only conclude that due diligence regarding existing neighborhood conditions and future permit challenges would have helped. Perhaps other nearby locations that were available would have been considered. Surely 2 very long time residential areas which have been steadily expanding since 2013, town meeting 2013, when residential by special permit was voted on overwhelmingly by the residents of Norfolk. I know I was there. I spoke there. I was thrilled that that bylaw was passed. So, since expansion since 2013 was following a highly residential trend, it is likely to conclude that that residential trend would probably continue. So here we are today on the verge of 2 very different types of construction based on use. Number 1, habitation. Homes, yards, some woods, maybe swimming pools, family, pets, human interaction. And non-habitation, buildings, vehicles, equipment, inventory, parking lots, lots of chain link fences, i.e. vehicular interaction. And yes, as ever, as I have expressed publicly before, traffic, traffic, traffic. We are fighting, our group, for families and the ability for a life of relatively undisturbed human interaction and activities. In the end, our opinion remains, and I feel strongly about this, that the project at 6 Hill Street is not a good fit for the location. We do earnestly hope that you will agree with us. The list of conditions that I just heard on and that our group worked very, very hard on several weeks ago, those conditions are so important. We appreciate so much the time that this board has put into the proposed project at 6 Hill Street. For so many years, Pondville really wasn't talked about very much. And here we are. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Tom Martin, 42 Everett Street. I would like to talk about the storage bins. Can I have drawing 9, please?
These things, is it this one?
Page 9 of the plans that you're looking for? You said it? Okay.
This is the storage bin cover. And if you look at it, right, it's actually 20 foot high. I believe it's 30 foot long, 30 foot wide, 40 foot long. This is for 40 yards. I can park 2 school buses in there and put 3 40-yard dumpsters in there. It's kind of oversized.
Well, as I recall, sir, the proposal is to make it that size such that the loading of trucks can occur within that shed as opposed to out in the open in order to minimize the noise and the lights and so forth.
The problem I have with it, as you come up Hill Street, right, if you make the turn in Hill Street, it's 20 feet high. It's as high as the building. Now you're going to see it. It's standing right there. If you put the cover over the top of that, you come up that street, it's standing right there in front of you.
Yeah, probably
I mean,
true.
there's no need to have it that big. It's only 40 yards.
Well, as I said, the developer has said that he wants to load his salt trucks in that shed as opposed to outside. So that may be why he's had the height requirement that he's got
Well, it
on
would be
it.
20 feet because the backhoe is only going to be 14 feet high.
Well, I'm just relaying what he told us.
All right. Now, my last question is that over the past couple of months, we've had many meetings here, and we've talked about putting the vehicles inside the building. And the applicant has said he doesn't want to do that. But I have a drawing here that's on his website that shows the building, a building that he has, that the equipment is inside the building. So he has done it in the past. I don't see why he can't do it in the future. Thank you.
Hi, it's Peter at 58 Everett. I just have a couple quick questions. The site plan, just to be clear about that area in the back where all the loading and noise activity are going to be, and that vacant lot, that is the old rail trail. It's probably about 50 feet wide at most. When we did the site walk with the applicant, we stood at the very end point of his plan. We could look at 54 Everett, their back patio. We could see it right there in front of us. So vacant lot, yes, very small, narrow piece of land. So I think that's why we're placing such great emphasis on the request that please, don't clear cut the entire property. Put some trees in the back, keep some buffer for the residents of Everett that are back there that are going to otherwise hear all of the very intrusive noise that will be inevitable should the kind of activity happen there that they plan. I had a question about landscape square foot. There's a minimum requirement of landscaping. I think we wanted to verify if that is actually being complied with in this plan. It looks like 2 very small areas of landscaping, and to my eye, does not look like what the requirements are. So, wondering if that question's been answered yet.
I don't think it's been answered yet, but we can verify that.
Okay.
The two landscaping portions are right out front of the building.
Correct.
Near the street, and there are calculations on the drawings which can be verified, yeah. And we will verify that.
Correct. So, and again, if that's insufficient, the back area, building a buffer there, keeping more natural screening would be a great option to help the residents here. my next question was just that shed, the size of that shed, is that defined as a structure?
I do not believe so. Rich can speak to that.
The interpretation of the zoning bylaw is that it doesn't qualify as a structure because they're, if I understand it right, they're concrete blocks that are placed on the ground, and there's a cover over them. The structure definition, it talks to affixing it to the land with a footing, piling, or foundation.
Is that, Rich, considered accessory building?
Accessory building.
Okay, if it is, so the accessory building, is this 20 feet high? Okay, 20 feet high, and your setback 17, so
The setback is the height, I believe it's 17
it
feet
is.
high.
Oh, 17 feet.
How high is the shed?
It's 6 foot, and it's got the 20-foot dome, so it's 26 from the OJ.
Don't have to comply with the height. The setback on the accessory building is the height, so the setback will have to.
Right, yep.
Okay, so is that saying that this current setback on the plan is accurate, correct, or?
It's going to be moved about 4 or 5 feet.
I see.
That's it.
Okay. All right, well, I guess to make the plan correct, that needs to happen. And then my last question is, what is the impact, what are the components of the impact study? And is that defined in this meeting, or is there standard, like, so the residents know what to expect from an impact study?
Good question. Rich can describe that list to you. I know he did for me.
I think basically, Peter, it's to make sure the activities going on do not substantially disturb the way of life for the rest of the people that are abutters in any way, whether it be noise, dust, activity, anything like that. I believe that's paraphrasing what the regulation calls for.
And if they do, then needs to be some mitigation.
Right. So does that entail doing the study at 2 in the morning? At hours when the ambient noise is at its lowest?
One of the things the planning board, if they decided to choose to do it, we could limit the hours of operation because of the area.
So within the bylaw, section 3.3.2.21, impact studies, there's a narrative that describes what needs to be covered, which is traffic, water supply, solid waste disposal, sewage, storm, water drainage, fire, police protection, and infrastructure in general, as well as environmental contamination issues of noise, water, air, etc. And that's in the first paragraph. If you go down further, it does talk about the board may require an impact statement as to the effect of the proposed, this is a subdivision, which isn't applicable here, but subparagraph below, impact to drainage abutting public water supply, as well as impact on public water supply in general. And then there are more directive requirements relative to the traffic assessment within the bylaw. So to answer your question, I think there needs to be kind of a methodology looked at as far as how to address each one of those items relative to noise.
Right.
We certainly know noise is something that, operates over different periods of time with background noise level compared to.
Right.
So I think the first step as the board is, given the go-ahead that they want to see the impact assessment done, I think it probably makes sense to dig in a little bit and maybe report back to the board on the methodology to try to study noise, because noise it's, as you know, we're talking about here the operation that's potentially overnight, during the day, so that's a big span of time to kind of have some methodology to kind of give a real answer for everybody on both sides. So.
Right. Right. Yeah, and clearly the overnight noise is of gravest concern. So we don't want that overlooked. We'd like that very much considered in this process.
Anything else, Peter? Okay.
So the traffic assessment and the impact study, two different things? I'm sorry.
There's, no,
Sean,
it's
okay.
within, it's all under the same section. If you wanna, I can certainly, forward it to you. There's several pages of what's required within a traffic study, so. I don't think you want me to read this all these pages, but,
No, I don't.
I'm hoping you don't. But we certainly can, we can take a look at it. The document is on the website too, if you want to point to it.
All right, anyone else in the audience care to comment or question? No, I'd like then to give it back to Ted and the applicant to offer any comments that they may have at this point.
Well, that pretty much paraphrased the letter from the neighborhood, and I think if the board's going to require an impact study, it's premature to dive into all that stuff without the study information that the board wants to see. So I think it'd be just more productive to have that and then go through all of the concerns raised.
One thought that that I had looking at these drawings, could we put the drawing back up that shows the salt shed?
The detail? The detail of this layout?
The one that's on the table here would be good if we could find that one.
Yeah, just the.
Oh, you want this one here?
The storage plan. Yeah, that one, there we go.
That's fine. Now, can you center the storage shed and expand it a little bit, please? We just, okay. Well, as soon as it stops moving, we can talk.
Just the fence, Ted.
Okay, that's good, thank you, Amy. We just heard that it probably needs to move a few more feet in the direction of the parking area.
So all of this land is
But
open.
the area behind the storage shed, close to the property line, is pretty high gradient in there. And we were scratching our heads saying, what if the back wall of that storage shed were raised up and that area was flattened a little bit, slope was flattened, and some plantings were put in there? It would act as a partial sound barrier as well as a sight barrier for the folks a couple of lots over on Everett Street. Something you might consider as a relatively easy way to offer some mitigation there.
Mr. Chairman, yes. Larry Tilton. That is entirely possible. If this is going to be ruled as a structure, we need to move 25 feet off, and we'll set this about 8 feet. It's going to go forward about 8 feet. If this wall was raised and it's right now about 6 foot high, and then the slope comes up, it's important to realize that the gradient differential from the yard, this area here to here, is about 20 feet in differential grade.
Yep.
The differential grade from the parking area that's today to the top of the railroad and then over to Everett, it's about 3 stories high. You got about a 30 some foot differential in grade.
Yep.
These properties are virtually on the top of a 3-story building, looking over the top of us. So, but you're entirely correct. If this wall was raised up in grade, then this area wouldn't have to slope down as much. It could be landscaped, and the sound barrier would be. But the sound barrier actually is going to be this existing differential of grade right here now.
True, but it would also be a sight barrier.
It would
And
entirely
cut some of the light and
you could
whatnot.
definitely.
It's not going to solve all the problems, but
Between
it's
this
it's a
area
pro-
here being re-landscaped and screened by vegetation, and the existing vegetation that will remain after this site is developed, both on the old railroad bed, and then on the other side of the railroad bed, if you look at the geodetic or the aerial photos, you will see that there's same type of vegetation all the way through, so. But you're entirely correct, this area could be re-landscaped, and this shed can be moved forward and
What about the
landscaped
gravel
in it.
area in that
This
like-
area here?
Yeah. The fence conveniently goes around the outside of that.
I'm sorry?
The fencing for
Yes,
the
is
storage.
this existing fence?
Yeah, the young lady that made the comment, this to me, with screening the whole lot as compared to the storage areas, which are only 4,500 feet, leads me to believe there possibly could have a whole construction area going in this whole spot.
Right
In
here.
theory, the storage area should be leveled, should be fenced off as the storage area, so we can confine it. We have no control after this where any storage would be, or any commercial activities will be. You're covering this whole lot with pavement and pavement. Why don't you grass that whole area up there? And if not, as a minimum, that's not storage up there, so bring the fence in. I think it's too convenient to fence in the whole lot.
Bring it into.
I'd like to see you bring it in and cover just the storage areas, which it talks about in our plan, in our regulations, because now you're leaving it so we have no control on what's gonna be stored there or what activities. And, you know, you're still gonna have to, Ted, you're gonna have to answer the question for me, why do you want 5,000 feet to store heavy equipment when you got a 9,000-foot building that's empty? You gotta answer that question, that sounds reasonable. If you're gonna store this stuff, and granted, you've got a lot of stuff going on there. Do you have a spill prevention plan? I mean, you may have 500 hydraulic hoses there. You've got pavement there, you've got wells there. Those hoses break, and you've got fluid and contaminants going in. We've already lost two whole streets that had to be redone with sewer and drainage because of a leak in one of these tanks or something. So this whole thing is set up to be one big commercial site. If you can't consolidate this and make it, you're covering the whole lot and there's no need, consolidate that, redefine this, give us some green space, and if you want storage area, fence in the storage area. And if you're gonna, it's minor, but maybe it's not, because I didn't do any calcs, but if you've got 1,440 feet up the side there on the right of the building, and you got a 180-foot building which says that you're allowing 8 feet, you got buildings, pieces sticking out there that are 10 feet. So the calculation's not right. You got things here for storage area, basically, so if you put stuff in, you can't open the door. So it's kind of unrealistic to it. You gotta make this thing work if you wanna have, as far as my vote goes, you gotta make this reasonable so the thing works, and you can't have this spread all out so we can have the 70 or 60 pieces of equipment doing whatever at all hours of the day and possibly contaminating the area. I don't just think it works. And to me, unless that building's filled with equipment, you know, I wouldn't be for it.
So just to clarify, one of the big purposes of this entire project was to add impervious area for equipment storage, including a wastewater management system that is fairly extensive, so that if oil does leak, it gets caught in the, is it called a storm scepter? Is that the correct name? Yeah, so there's a very fancy water filtration system that's going in to protect us from exactly such a situation.
Details on that system,
It's included, yeah.
it's in there, yeah.
I mean, we're headed down a road where we're gonna recommend that they get the impact study done.
Yeah,
I don't know what more there is to discuss tonight.
why isn't there up top area green then? If it's just empty gravel, why do we put some green there? And why is the fence around there so it'll be blocked in with slats when it could be possibly used for activity? We're supposed to be fencing in just the areas of storage, not everything.
Doesn't it minimize the impact on the neighborhood if the property is fully screened?
I would think it would. I would support, John's point of view that the storage perhaps could be consolidated and separately screened, but I'm not against a fence around the whole property, a screened fence around the whole property. I think that, to your point, I think it does minimize the impact on the neighborhood, yes.
Just, what you're looking at, it's important to keep in mind. What you see isn't coming and going at all hours of the night. That's not the case.
No,
This is seasonal storage. These are out on site now. They're not there.
Yeah.
And they come back, and so they're to be stored. So, it's not a vacant building. It's carefully organized. He has equipment in there. He has lanes to get his forklift in there. This is dramatically reduced from one of our prior meetings to get as much storage inside as possible.
Is there a drawing, Ted, that shows the storage plan inside?
No, there is not.
We don't have that.
There has not been one prepared.
Considering the heat on the issue.
Sure.
It might be good, if you've got a plan in mind, it might be good to demonstrate what that is.
Sure, we can
Okay.
demonstrate that for the board.
I think it's important to realize that this small equipment, that's the sanders, the little stuff that comes back in the spring, gets serviced, then it's put out till next fall, and then of course it's loaded out of there and put in the back of the pickups and do the
Just
work.
perfect to be put inside.
So, well, one, I need some area to maintain the equipment when it comes back for spring.
Sure, sure.
And then inside, and then we take it out and get serviced and put it away. The tires in here, that's a reasonable place to put it. This is, it's, if you need a sander, you go in and get it and you set it in the truck and it's gone and so on. But it's just dead storage for the summer and then put it away. And this is the reinforced side slope in here, so it's a natural place to put this small little stuff out of the way, out of sight. We'll deal with it next fall when we need it. So that's a perfect location for the tag trailers and then the vehicles and then the heavy equipment down in here. It's a perfect place. Once it's serviced, it's moved out, set in, we pick it up next fall and send it out to the site. So, and this, it's a one user now, completely on the entire site, so.
All right, I think Aaron's point is well taken, but there is one more thing I'd like to mention before we move on, and that is hours of work. John mentioned earlier that one of the prerogatives of the board is to limit the hours of work. So if you could describe what you believe you need, it would help the board to understand how you perceive the business, and then we could describe what we think would be appropriate.
Okay, so
If I might jump in, sorry. I mean, all of that's going to be outlined in the impact report, right?
Well, I want the issue discussed tonight, Aaron.
Our typical hours to work, okay, snow hours, when
Snowing, we have to work. If there's black ice, we have to work. But describe what goes on.
So what goes on here is people show up, they grab the trucks, and they leave. So all the equipment for plowing is off-site. The only people that show up to this site is managers. So right now that's 3 trucks. They're all gas-powered. I think there's 2 F-350 size trucks, 1 F-550 size truck. So small, relatively speaking, small trucks, quiet trucks. They leave at the beginning of the storm. They come back at the end. In the proposed use, they'd be coming back occasionally, potentially occasionally, to reload with salt. I broke down the actual usage for loading salts during storms and looking at a worst-case scenario. I think I presented that to the board at a previous meeting. So absolute worst-case scenario that we've seen historically, there's this many trips in a 24-hour period. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it worked out to like 1 trip every 3 hours or something on average. No, I believe that was total. I'd have to check the notes from that previous meeting.
Okay, understood. Thank you for your comments. All right, anyone have any last-minute comments before we continue this discussion? Sir, take your microphone, please.
Sean McGrath, 57 Everett Street. I just wanted to see if there's ever any clarification on number of vehicles that were going to be on there, because every time we've done
Number
this,
of what?
Vehicles,
Vehicles,
in total. Because every time from the beginning it went up. I just want to know if there was a number now. Yeah.
We have
And then I thought it was like 75 at one other point. That's why.
there's a plan in front of us. We could count it, but well, he's counting. What was the number, sir?
So there'll only be 6 cars there at any time.
No, as I understand it, those light green vehicles are there in the summer when it's not snowing.
Just to clarify that, I think he's counting, it's kind of vague what's considered a commercial vehicle, whether a front-end loader is considered a commercial vehicle or not.
These are registered for on the road. These are off-road.
So that's it then. Okay.
All right, thank you. We need a motion to continue the public hearing on 6 Hill Street.
Could we ask that we just republish the number of trips per car, per vehicle that we're looking at, especially given that this could happen at any time of day?
We have that information that he's provided. Rich can make it available.
Okay.
Well, it's actually, it'll be incorporated in traffic study,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we need a motion to continue the site plan and special permit for outdoor storage, stormwater, and earth removal permits from now until our next meeting on February 11th at 7:30 PM.
No,
No, what?
there's no way this can come back in a month.
All right, until,
Well, the motion's gonna make a recommendation that the applicant pursue a impact study and a traffic study, right? So,
that's a different motion.
well, we would make that one previous to
Well, we should.
scheduling
Okay,
their
all right.
return, right?
Why don't you make that motion?
Motion to recommend that the applicant pursue a impact study and a traffic study to present to the board and the concerned residents.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, now we can entertain the motion to continue the public hearing until
First
March?
time that the studies are complete.
What do you think, Ted? March?
Yeah, I would ask for 60 days. That's a total shot in the dark. I think.
Well, it is. We
I think
can,
it's aggressive, but if I need to, I'll ask.
we can move it again if we need to.
But I think that's a good target.
Fine. March 10th at, let's say, 7:15 PM.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Did Lincoln Street postpone?
It will be, yes. It'll be continued.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So we're all set for a 7:45 meeting, Walter.
The chair requests a 2-minute comfort break.
Comfort break?
Yeah.
Racing it though.
I'll be there around here.
Okay. Go, go, go.
March 10th.
How you doing, John?
Oh, good, thank you,
I don't
Joe.
see you driving around much anymore.
Yeah, there's nothing going on till
You've
the
been,
spring.
I was like,
I'm doing taxes.
yeah, well, I was telling
I got
Allison,
my
I'm
second
like-
job.
I was like, I haven't seen John in a while. I hope he's okay. I'm like, I don't see him.
I just
And then I
finished.
was like, he's doing taxes.
I just did
forgot.
4 of those things last
Did you?
year, and I'm thrilled for the day. You have no idea.
The cul-de-sac. Did you sell that lot to somebody else and let them build? Okay.
Beautiful. They're building for themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a lawyer and a builder, so
Oh,
3
okay.
of them are gonna move to a beautiful home.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And I sold the lot for $500,000.
Wow.
I know,
How many acres is that?
I know. 2.5.
That's it?
But it oversees the tracks too. Those tracks become popular. I get every lot sold on those except for one. They're selling like hotcakes.
I don't understand why.
And they're all going for about 3 more than you paid.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
I wouldn't want to.
I never would have figured it.
I wouldn't have thought that either.
You know, for 70 to go across the street, it just shows you the dynamics of price. I'm never,
You just
I'm
can't.
not amazed at the dynamics pricing has,
Right.
really. You think that to add that on to the mortgage, right, it's not a big deal each month, it's just get on your side, right?
I was not.
It's not how I've seen it work.
Is it?
I was not able to review
Because
that
that's
drainage
the
report.
street.
I was not able to review that drainage
Partly,
report.
and I did make those 100 feet
Yeah.
deeper, so they're like an inch and a half long, to get an extra protection from the train, and behind their house is a basin, so. But you still, the last one I built, they're putting a big pool in like yours.
Oh, are they?
Front right, yeah.
That white, the White
Yeah,
House with
yeah, yeah, I mean,
It's
Even at
stacked.
one
It's like-
story?
yeah.
great people.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't met him, but I've
You
heard
can
great
see it
things.
as clear as day. I gotta go, I'll be right back, Walter.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, well, I know there's still comfort breaks going on, but, thought maybe we read the notice for 15 Lincoln Road before we get to Meeting House, and then continue Lincoln Road, and then we jump back in the Meeting House if we,
Okay, okay,
don't think there's anybody here for Lincoln Road.
we will wait a minute for John to return. All right, so you've got that, we're gonna do Meeting House first, excuse me, Lincoln Road first.
We're gonna read in.
Nice jacket, I like that jacket.
What's that?
Christmas present, maybe?
No. I would be so lucky.
What? Come on, John.
Daniel coming, or not?
He's not here. I'm here representing.
Oh, you are, okay. Okay.
What's the first name?
John.
John?
Last name.
Stuck in a sandwich.
He's stuck
Kinda
in a
sandwich.
sandwich, or?
Maybe.
Oh.
He's staying in the sandwich tonight. I might go meet in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had a 5 o'clock meeting. I was hoping to make it a little bit
Oh, see, that's behind two, that mean, huh? See, that's not bad.
All right, we're going to just go out of order in the agenda a little bit here and take 15 Lincoln Road, which is going to be continued, and read that into the record. Please, Gary.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with Mass General Law, Section 40A, and the Norfolk zoning bylaws, Section F11. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, at 8 p.m. in Room 124 at the Norfolk Town Hall, 1 Liberty Lane, Norfolk, Mass., regarding a stormwater management permit application for property located at 15 Lincoln Road in Norfolk, Mass. The applicant, Next Grid Incorporated, San Francisco, California, has applied for a stormwater management permit in conjunction with the proposed construction of a large ground-mounted photovoltaic solar system, including demolition of existing structures, construction of access drive, site preparation, installation of site utilities, and construction of an infiltration basin. The property is located in the B4 zoning district, reference Assessors Map 22, Block 76, Lot 19. The plan and application are available for public inspection in the office of the Norfolk Planning Board during the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday.
Thank you, Gary. So, Rich, we've received a request to continue, true?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so
And,
we need a motion to continue the site plan review until February 11th at 7:15, I think is what you said.
7:30.
Have we've already used that, huh? 7:30, okay.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. All right, now we get to 41 Meeting House Road. And this is a continuation of the hearing that we've had. Is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, continuation, right, all right.
Did you
So,
read the notice? We need to read
Oh,
the
wait.
notice.
There's a notice too,
Yes.
sorry.
we need to read the notice?
There's a stormwater management permit.
Fair enough, go ahead.
Notice is hereby given in accordance with Mass General Law, Section 40A, and the Norfolk zoning bylaw, Section F11. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, at 7:45 p.m. in Room 124 at the Norfolk Town Hall, 1 Liberty Lane, Norfolk, Mass., regarding a stormwater management permit application for property located at Meeting House Road in Norfolk, Mass. The applicant, Daniel Serber of NextGrid Incorporated, San Francisco, California, has applied for a stormwater management permit in conjunction with the proposed construction of a ground-mounted photovoltaic system with a total capacity of 249.66 kilowatts, including gravel access drive, site fencing, site grading and drainage. The property is located in the B1 zoning district, reference Assessors Map 14, Block 41, Lot 9. The plan and application are available for public inspection in the office of the Norfolk Planning Board during the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday.
Thank you, Gary. Sir.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Nathan Collins, principal with CLC Design, engineer of record, and here on behalf of NextGrid, Inc. Some changes we've made to the plan since our last meeting on December 10th. If you recall, last time we spoke, we actually performed test pits on site the morning of December 10th. So we made some modifications to the stormwater design and basin based on those results. I'll go over those in a little bit of detail. In addition, we've had some back and forth with the Conservation Commission on the existing detention pond that was constructed as part of the original townhome development. Unfortunately, records haven't been kept as accurate as we wanted for the existing detention pond. So over time and per the regulations, that actually has been deemed a wetland. So we also made some slight modifications to the layout to stay outside of the 50-foot buffer to that detention pond, and we will be filing a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. Our goal is to try to get on the, I think it's February 11th hearing. So in regards to stormwater, I don't know if you want to go a couple plans down. The overall grading of the site really hasn't changed. What did change was the size and depth of the detention pond. So our original submission, we had assumed an infiltration rate of 0.09 inches an hour, which was based on Rawls rates in the soils that were on site. Based on the actual test pits performed, we did 2 test pits. They're located and shown on the plan. The 2 infiltration rates were, one of them was actually less than 2 minutes an inch, couldn't keep water in the hole, and the other one was about 4 minutes an inch. So to be conservative, we used the 4 minutes an inch or 15 inches an hour in terms of our infiltration into the basin. What it did is, originally we had a detention pond with a depth of about 4 feet. Now that pond itself is only 2.5 feet at its deepest location. So we were able to maintain a 3-to-1 slope on the sides, which was one of Beta Group's comments as it related to design. But it'll perform similar to how originally designed, just not as deep. It'll store water, detain it, infiltrate it, and we've actually sized this pond to handle the 100-year storm event per the town of Norfolk's bylaws. So the maximum elevation based on the 100-year storm event will be 1 foot below this overflow.
And where does the overflow go?
The overflow, so we analyze this site based on the topography. There's basically 3 catchment areas within this property. There's we analyze this westernmost area. There's kind of a middle area, and then you can see a ridge here, stormwater that just kind of flows in an easterly direction. So we analyze catchment area 1, catchment area 2, which currently everything just sheet flows over land to the property south. And under proposed conditions, we actually broke it up into 2 areas, catchment area 2A, catchment area 2B. So all the area that we're clearing and developing, if you will, is going to slope and flow through a series of swales to this detention pond. So our change in surface is mitigated through this detention pond. And then catchment area 2B, if you will, is going to remain wooded and vegetated and continue to flow over land. So they're still connected. They still have the same design outfall point, if you will. Just we're attenuating this area that we're clearing. The overall square footage of clearing did not change. If you want to go back to the layout, the next one down. So again, this is the driveway that we showed at our previous meeting. We took it off of the access drive. We've maintained a point where DPW can access this water tower in the future. We've maintained a greater than 100-foot buffer along this property line. The only pinch point would be around the detention basin where we're trying to maintain 15 feet around that for maintenance. If we could get relief over by the outfall, we could reduce that more, but currently this is designed in accordance with the town's bylaws and stormwater management regulations. And that's really it in terms of changes from the last time we met. Again, comments we received from the fire department, we've maintained 15 feet around all of the solar panels themselves.
I presume that's an uncommon request.
It is not, no.
Yeah.
So, again, those were the only changes, and I guess at this point I'll open it up to the board for questions.
Questions from board members?
Just to Phil, if there's anything he wants to point out from his review.
Anything out there, Phil, that's hanging out there that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to go through the calculations in depth. I did notice that there's a few things. The change in CN value for the existing conditions, I think you need to use good woods. We needed backup for the time of concentration.
Those are provided today. It was late, but.
We need backup for the time of concentration. We need, you can't use a perk test for soil, stormwater infiltration. You need to use either an in situ saturated conductivity test, or you need to use a Rawls method. In general, even if you do the testing on soils, you got to use the half of that value. So those are some things, the kind of the big things I saw. Again, I didn't get to go through all of them.
Okay.
If I could, on the time of concentrations, the reports provided, you need backup on those reports?
So typically, it's I don't know how you included the calcs, because it just says direct entry 27.2 minutes.
You may not have an opportunity. Again, the revised report was submitted late, so you may have not had an opportunity to look at it. But,
Yeah,
a revised report was provided today.
I know. This.
Yes. So following the catchment area maps, our time of concentration worksheets.
Well, Phil,
I don't
Phil have a
that
chance.
didn't come included with mine.
Phil have a chance to review that and
Sure.
get back to you. Chad, anything come up? Gary, any questions? John? No? All right, then, sir.
Sorry, so the resolution to that is there's still some questions that Baker
Yes.
needs answered.
So if I could ask just on the CN values, fair versus good, those are going to impact both existing and proposed, which will kind of offset each other. I guess I'll certainly revise the report, but just, we typically, on an undeveloped area, I typically use fair, because I don't know who makes a determination of whether it's good or poor, so I usually go with the middle range. And again, as you compare those, it's not changing from existing to proposed, so they're kind of offsetting each other, if you will.
Not really, because you're going from woods good to grass good, right?
Sure, yep.
Well, that's a difference.
Understood, but again, using a fair CN value, I'm actually saying that more water is going into that.
So no, you're using the fair under it would affect the existing conditions. If you use fair under existing conditions, you're shedding off more water. If you use good, it's a lower CN, which means more water infiltrates, which means you're gonna have to mitigate more when you go to grass.
But if I'm using, in my existing conditions analysis, if I'm using good, am I allowed to use good under my proposed analysis as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So understood. I can revise the stormwater report.
Fair enough. All right, so I think at our next session, which will be a month from now, we will be prepared to close the hearing. I'm not going to close the hearing until we resolve these issues, which sound like they're resolvable fairly quickly, but nevertheless, next meeting, we should have a decision in hand, a draft decision we'll be prepared to sponsor, and we'll close the hearing at that time once we resolve these drainage issues.
Does he want to wait till it goes through conservation, just in case it changes?
Well,
Do you want to wait till you go through conservation to close out here?
yeah, well, you're in when on
This is
Our
cons-
goal is to get into for the 11th,
turns out that's the date of our meeting.
or maybe it's the 13th, again.
Well, John's point is that hopefully you would have your conservation meeting review ahead of our next meeting, and therefore that issue, whatever issues may or may not come up there
Sure.
would be behind us, and we could close it out and have a decision. But it
Yeah,
doesn't look like.
if the dates didn't work out, I would just request that our approval there was a condition that stated.
Yeah,
If we close the hearing, then we'd have to open it again, which is time, work, and money. If we keep it open and just wait for conservations, and if there's no changes, then close
Yeah.
it, give you a condition, then you don't have any jeopardy there
Yeah.
if they change something.
but we will have, in the meantime, we will have a draft decision to review pending any conservation issues that come up.
Did you want to
Sir.
open this to the?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
Yes, anyone in the audience care to comment or raise a question? Grab the microphone, please.
Barbara Carter, 36 Union Street. Could you show me, I need a little bit of clarification on the fence and the tree line. Is the tree line at the fence? So I see where the fence is.
There's areas where the tree line is directly at the fence. There are some spots where, for purposes of grading, the fence is inside of the limits of clearing.
Okay.
So, for example, this is the proposed fence line. See that there? And this is the proposed tree line. But in this area, that's because there's a swale redirecting.
Okay.
runoff.
Okay. So the reason why I asked that, this is the third time that I've been at this meeting. I think everyone here probably realizes that I'm the one that is concerned about how my view might change in the future. And I went up to the hill this past weekend and saw the stakes, the fence stakes. And I did a little experiment because last time I was here, I think folks thought, no, your view's not going to change. It's going to be the same because it's so dense up there. So I got a big piece of paper that was orange. I had my husband hold it on my lawn. I went went up to the stake and I took a photo of my husband holding the piece of paper on the lawn. And then I tagged the piece of paper on a tree near the stake, went back down to my lawn, took a picture of that, went upstairs to my upstairs bedroom, took a picture of that. So my little experiment confirmed that I can see up the hill. So with that being said, you know, not knowing where this is going and whether or not this gets approved, if this does get approved, what will you do for, you know, everyone else, you know, the condo association is benefiting from this, even the town is benefiting from this with the road to the water tower. The folks on Union Street are not benefiting at all, and I would argue that we are, you know, we're not benefiting, and you know, it's probably not a great situation. So, what could you do to mitigate the fact that I may see something up there? Are there plantings that we can do? Is there? I know there's a chain link fence. Is there a? What can we do to you know, to make the neighbors and the residents of Union Street who have to put up with this, perhaps? What can you do for us?
Can you put up the sightline drawing that you created?
It's the section.
In this plan set? Oh, the section?
No, it's a separate PDF. You got it.
SK2 or SK1?
This one would work.
SK2.
But if you can. So, again, I did add the profile for 38 Union Street. That I don't believe it's, but
He's right here.
so 36. So I did add, at your request, I added kind of a sight line based on a, you know, just straight looking out your window versus, and then a 15-degree angle, which we use for more for like spectator seating in terms of looking around. But this particular property, there's about I'll call it 150 feet of vegetation, or 150-foot separation, the approximate tree line on her property to where the limits of the clearing would be, and then an additional 100 feet to any solar panel. Certainly, these panels nor the fence are bright white or bright orange. I think the black chain link fence masks itself a little. I will admit that this time of year, it's going to be more visible than any other part of the year. And I know, talking with the applicant today, he's not opposed to adding evergreens if after construction there is still an issue in terms of visibility to that area.
Well, we could make that a condition of our approval.
Did you say some of the panels are orange?
No. I'm saying she
No, my piece of paper was
She
orange.
made note that the paper she used was a orange piece of paper.
Yeah, international orange, right?
Yep.
No, the panels are black. Sorry if there was any confusion on that. And the fence that's proposed is black as well.
How far is the fence away from the closest panel?
We're maintaining 15 feet.
15 feet?
Yeah, around. It gets a little bit wider and based on the angles in some spots.
So,
15-foot minimum.
What you're saying is that you could put some evergreens at the end of what is shown there as the tree line, right?
Along, portions of that area where if after following construction, it remained a.
Yeah, well, go to the drawing that shows the actual cuts.
Sure, it's one up.
One
Or,
up.
sorry, they're separate. It's the one.
Separate sheet.
Yeah, site plan.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it, if we can get that up there.
So
All right.
again, I had added that's the 38 down here. He's the furthest away. He's over 400 feet to the tree line. I believe What, I'm sorry, your address?
36.
36, so this is you here, correct? So, there's also about a 25-foot grade change, I believe.
All right, so when you come back next month, if you would be so kind as to show us where you put those evergreens.
So,
I will say, the applicant would prefer to not put them in.
I understand, but the resident would prefer that you put them in, and I think the board would probably, I don't speak for the board, I speak for me at the moment. Board would probably recommend that you put them in, make it a condition of approval.
Are you talking the whole, can you provide me kind of an area or a limit of anywhere?
I think your engineering work can give you guidance as to where you would recommend putting them in, because you've got the cut lines, you've got the slopes, you know where the views are going to be not impacted and where they will be impacted.
Again, it's our opinion.
From some houses, from the elevations that you provided, does not look like some of the houses would be able to see the
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the engineering work which would give you the guidance to say, I recommend we do this, but we don't do it there.
Okay. My engine work recommends that there will be no impacts, or minimal, but I'll show a limit of arborvitaes.
And, all right, and if your engineering continues to show that there's no impact, the board's engineering may overrule that.
Why don't you put pine trees up rather than arborvitaes?
Just a quick question about arborvitaes. I thought,
Deer will eat those in no time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Evergreen, this is.
I think if you add your berm, looks like you have a berm.
Here.
Yeah, I think you, so I think if you draw a line from the vantage point, assuming only the ground is gonna have impact, then you'll probably be able to tell where to put, where that berm goes and how, if you're gonna hit the panels. It doesn't look like you're gonna, based on what I just wrote.
Approval of the screening too. when it's
Well, I
all
don't want to
done.
open that up, I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe put
Or our approval.
shrubs
Yeah,
on
our
it,
approval.
evergreen shrubs on top of the berm.
If it's all
We can handle-
done,
I'll-
we'll take a look ourselves and see if we need more.
Yeah, not deer favorable plantings.
Sir, wait a minute, you'll get a chance. This gentleman wants to speak.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Carter at 36 Union Street, husband holding the orange placard, so, yeah, I saw it. You can see them. You'll see that detention pond, I can guarantee it. But what concerns me most is that detention pond. I know I'm not a geologist. I can see it's uphill from my house. It's very disturbing, two things, that the old detention pond is now a wetland because it was not maintained, has nothing to do with your project, but it's concerning. And the other concern I have is, I went today and got a beta report from the town, and I guess it was old, but it said that the timing and access prevented proper testing of this, and it requested a waiver to build and construct and then figure out how to fix the drainage pond if it doesn't work. And I'm not, a geologist. I don't know retention from detention pond. The pond is the word that disturbs me. It's up the hill. I don't want a big skating rink in the winter if it doesn't drain. I know that there's tons of rock, call it ledge, whatever. I was here when they were building those houses up there, and there was a lot of dynamiting going on. You don't dynamite dirt. I'm not a geologist, but I know that there's a lot of ledge. So I'd be very shocked to find that drains as fast as you say it will. I have a hard time finding a place to put my bird feeder poles, literally. So that's what I want to say. Very concerned, and the fact that we're all neighbors. I appreciate your time. I would appreciate that. It's disappointing that we're still planning this, because this is affecting us. It certainly will be visible, and we all want to have good neighbors. Thank you.
Have you checked the regulations on the screening requirements for detention basin?
Yes, but again, as noted in Beta's review, there's significant vegetation that will be around
Well,
that.
you'd have to ask for a waiver. You can't just assume that there's sufficient, and we've got a problem with sight distance. So right now, I suggest you look at the regulations, look at the requirements for screening for the basin, and then maybe talk to Phil about putting that in the plan. That would probably, where there's a berm in that basin, that may eliminate a lot of the view.
As far as the drainage from that basin, we will have Phil assure us that the ground below the basin is sufficient to drain, so that, you know, you're not gonna have a skating rink on your property down the hill. Unless you want one, that's a different story.
I don't want plant, you know. There was mention of a second watershed area, like in area 2B, or, you know, I don't want that B to be my basement. You know, I'm right down the hill from there. And so, I mean, what kind of assurance other than, yeah, you know, certainly not build it and then see if it works. That's, well, crazy.
If I can respond to that, that was a comment from the original application, and those test pits have been completed, and depth of groundwater, depth of bedrock have all been confirmed in that area. I just have to modify the actual infiltration rates based on.
All right, this gentleman would like to ask a question or make a comment?
Steve Fosco, 67 Meeting House Road, and also a trustee up at Meeting House. We went up to the area on January 1st from our area, looking down at the abutters on the other side, and took pictures, enlarged the pictures, and we looked through all of them, and we just as far as viewing, couldn't see any of the houses through the foliage that's there with the leaves gone. So we just don't think that these being, you know, 5 feet off the ground, based on the angle of where these houses are, that these are going to be visible to anywhere, especially from standing there looking down. You can't even really see any of the houses that are there. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. All right, please, yeah.
If you're implying that you would change your mind if you could see them, I would welcome you to come and see. If you really don't care, that's a different story.
Well, we're going to assume that you can see them, and we're going to request that some evergreens be added to the design to make it more opaque, if you will.
Thank you.
Has anyone from the board had an opportunity to walk that fence line that was staked at your request?
I have not walked it.
I'm just curious.
I have not walked it.
I did walk it.
What did you see?
I couldn't see anything.
Thank you.
I couldn't, and I looked at your cross sections that you put in here, and I mean, I only see where it impacts 30 Union, could possibly see a few panels. The other properties I don't see. I drew I drew some lines on there, and I didn't. It's just my personal analysis.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'll be happy to share the photos that I took that showed the, albeit orange piece of paper, but it does show that you can see both ways.
All right, thank you very much. We will entertain a motion to continue this hearing until our meeting on February 11th at 7:45 p.m.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
See you next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Next item of business is Mr. Peter Chipman with an informal discussion on a proposed development plan for 201 Main Street.
Informal. I can recuse myself.
Will you send the fucking piece of property? I think you are, yeah.
Yes, it's not, if you're on the agenda, it's a public hearing, that's a formal.
All right. Strictly informal, keep it informal.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, can you have that discussion outside so we can get on with our business? All right, Mr. Weddleton is recusing himself because he has a piece of property that's within so many feet of Mr. Chipman's property, so.
So, yeah. Informal or formal?
This is only an informal discussion.
Nevertheless.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Chipman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this on?
Yeah.
If it's a green light, it's on.
Thank you very much. The new plan, same as the old plan, due to our unfortunate non-change of events at town meeting for proposed zoning. So, as a result, this is something I had previously discussed with Rich long before even your study committee got together. We had worked out a proposed plan to almost a by right proposal. The only thing that is missing on this is the ability to get a special permit for the rear residential dwellings that would not fall obviously within the 6 to 19 feet setback line. The rudimentary calculations have provided on a separate sheet. I think Rich got them to you. I apologize, they're not done in a scheduled form, but I just wanted to get a little feedback and also gauge your interest, comments, feelings about the special permit need.
Good, can you go back to the original drawing, please? Okay, why don't you describe what these buildings are, Peter, and tell us more about the proposal here.
Absolutely. There's, on the streetscape front line, there are two two-story buildings that are 42 by 55 for a total of 4,620 square feet of commercial. There's a porch overhang in front of each one, and I broke out that square footage. Plus or minus, it would be adjusted accordingly. There are two apartments above each one of the buildings. So I separated them for two reasons. One, for massing scale reason, and two, not going above the two residential units, they don't have to be sprinklered. Secondly, is we have three single-story ranch-style dwellings, approximately 1,400 to 1,500 square feet. Whatever the math works out, because the bylaw requires that the residential cannot exceed 65%.
Total square footage of the development.
Total square footage of the development. I'm sorry, Walter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yep.
The drainage is going directly into the drainage basement to the town drainage. We have already arranged for that. Walter, you were instrumental in that as well.
Yeah.
So that's nothing on site. All of the septic has been done for a year and a half now. This initially is going to be developed as a single lot. Rich brought up the point that the driveway was in the second lot, but
Where is it? Oh, I see, the yellow line there?
to the right, that second lot, that's not going to become a second lot until we in fact are successful in developing the first,
Yeah.
and then if, Amy, can you pop up the second one if you don't mind? Then we would move on. The shared drive, whoa.
Whoops.
Can you go up a little? Okay.
That's good.
And it would become a shared driveway, I see, okay, yeah, right, yeah.
And at that time, we would break them up into individual lots. They are all, as standalone, they meet zoning of 75 feet and 30,000, 75-foot frontage and 30,000 square feet minimums as just regular standalone B1 lots.
Okay, right. Questions from the board?
I guess I would have a question somewhere, but I don't know how to frame it around the shared access.
I'm just looking for any kind of feedback, so go ahead.
No, and I'm, familiar with much smaller plans. 2 houses have a shared drive, so I don't really know it seems like the drive's coming right down the property line?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What he's saying is he's not gonna separate the lots until the first one's successful. And so then he'll know that the 2 lots work and he can work out easements.
And then we'll have a cross easement for both properties at that time.
Okay.
So when he builds it, he's gonna build it on one giant lot. He's only gonna develop 1/3 of it. Then he'll split the lots.
Is that the way it is registered now, as one giant lot, Peter?
Yes, we originally went for an A&R several years ago, but we never bothered filing it. Because
Okay.
the changes never went about in zoning, even prior to
Yeah.
our last go-around with
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
zoning. So
okay.
we never bothered filing the A&R at that time.
Fair
There
enough.
was a consideration
Yeah.
to do it at
Yeah, I
back
remember
then.
that, but anyway, it's still
But it
registered
is
as
currently
one lot.
one lot, that is correct.
Okay.
And in keeping with the streetscape thought process, I think, rather than having 1 or 2 big buildings there, I'm not even talking about the 3rd lot yet, I think the individual units will lend itself as well to maybe a better look. But we'll get to that point on design review, I guess.
Well, that speaks to, one would presume that the 3rd lot would be developed in a similar fashion.
Yes, but, the 3rd lot has a different grade change. It's kind of a funky shaped lot. I didn't even want to venture there yet. At least the other 2 are pretty fair. They're straightforward, easily developed lots, in my opinion.
And the tie-in to the town wastewater, not wastewater, stormwater, is that
Top left
rectangular,
corner.
that rectangular with the 3 red dots in it there?
No, that's the septic tank. If you go to the top left corner where that green is, that's the 57-foot by 360-foot long road that I gave the town for the drainage. That used to be part of the lot.
Yeah, and so the tie-in is up there to the town?
That green right there,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah.
And there's a manhole, and it's been tested
Yeah.
courtesy of the town
Yeah.
and resolved 14 years later.
So that's for runoff, and that's the septic shown?
No,
under
the septic is what's in the middle, it's
Yeah.
those galleys
Red, yeah.
there.
Yeah.
The septic
Okay.
is completely separate from the stormwater drainage.
Okay.
So I guess what I'd be looking for tonight is your feelings and directions on a special permit on having the residential in the back.
I've seen this proposal before, as you said, Peter. I'm fundamentally all right. The thing that strikes me, though, is if you could, Amy, raise it up a little bit so we can see those rear units. Scotia bit more.
I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah, the plan got cut off.
You have to go to the other PDF, it'll show.
Yeah, if you go to the single PDF, I think it'll show you.
There you go,
You
okay.
have the single lot.
At any rate, there'll be 2 lots, and it'll be ultimately, if things go well for you. 6 residences back there. They back right up onto the railroad track.
Yeah, 40 feet below.
I understand.
Right.
But what would you, I know this is getting ahead of ourselves, but what would you propose for vegetation along that back?
Well, that
property?
entire back, back line is completely vegetated with old-growth pine, and it's also, it grades up 6 to 8 feet in the back. You can almost make out some grade lines.
Contour lines there, yeah.
In the back. And, well, there's a minimum rear yard setback in the B1 of 5
Yep,
feet.
yep.
Anyways, we wouldn't even be coming close to that because I think we reach into at least 10 to 15 feet from the actual property line. But,
Well, yeah, setback is one issue, but screening is really what my.
well, the screening is there's a path that's grown over, but right across from the post office.
Yep.
Is a walkable path. You wanted to walk back there, up on the ridge, for lack of a better term, at the bottom of the screen. All those pines are still in
Okay
place.
for us to do that, walk back there?
Please do.
Okay, all right.
It's not poison ivy season. Otherwise, I'd say not to.
Okay, okay, all right.
There's a natural buffer because this is,
yeah.
it varies anywhere from 50 to 57 feet wide. That I gave the town.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's a natural setback from any residential area, which
Right.
is what Walsh's landscaping is.
Yeah, they're on the other side of that road.
To the
Yeah,
left, yes.
Well, I think the application for a special permit would be favorably received from my point of view. I don't know about the rest of the board, but.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I haven't really given my thoughts yet. I think it's a pretty good proposal based on the current zoning guidelines. I'll dream a little bit that I'm obviously a big proponent of the proposed changes. And, you know, there's essentially 4 sites in town that would invite multi-unit development, this being one of them. So to see such a low density being put on this site seems like a missed opportunity for me from what we're proposing through the B1 committee. It's hard to say, given we have no idea what's gonna come out of that committee or the town meeting when it comes or whatnot, but, so other than just pointing out that, you know, it is one of 4 sites in town that would promote a higher density development. It would be nice to see more here. That being said, I understand that it meets the current guidelines that we have aside from the residences in the back, but it's also somewhat conveniently planned to have no affordable housing requirements, which is also concerning for the town because it means we're adding residences to the town we're worsening our affordable housing numbers, which is a clever way to develop a lot, but not a great way for the town to address its affordable housing issues. I do think it would add to the village feel in town with the multiple buildings. 5,000 square feet is a pretty small number. And it's essentially, Silla's is around 5,000 square feet, I think, isn't it? 6,000 square feet. So it's.
Silla's the coffee shop? I think it's 18 and 18 respectively.
So the whole building's.
That's smaller
5,
than.
yeah. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. I meant that building. So it's essentially that building 4 more times. But yeah, I mean, in the scheme of things, it's, yeah.
Aaron, to be, quite candid with you, prior to you even going with the last round, of which I was a participant and fully supportive, in 2010, we spent endless hours there, here, at the library, trying to push the Downtown Development Committee as well. and then they back it off at town meeting. I've held this property for a long time. I wanted for the right opportunity. I was offered a lot of money for it, but the guy that wanted a contingency of a 5-story 40B, and they said, not in your life. So it's not a matter of, taking advantage of it. I live here. I have actually recently sold my house and bought another place here. So I'm here. I want to basically see that in town developed, right? Waiting for town meeting to act. I don't know, how much hair did you lose over the last round?
Yeah, well, my comment wasn't meant, I know I said I feel like it's a missed opportunity. I didn't say it was a missed opportunity by you.
Right. No, and I didn't take it that way, but the point is, it's repeating itself.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, and literally the only thing that is staying in the way is the fact that you need a special permit to not between 6 and 19 feet. Rich went to town council on it, worked with Walter on it, and there was just no way of even getting an indication, and even separately, independent of that. So, short of getting a feedback, this is the best we can do. And to be quite honest with you, these are, take a look at what you're dealing with as far as septic alone just for these units. It takes up a big piece of it. That's all those lateral red lines. So, sure, you put up a big building, if everything worked out well on the first 2 lots, use the last lot for a small package treatment plant, but in order for that, you could get your 60 to 80 feet units pretty quick. I'm not interested in the 40B business, never have been, and I've told Walter that, I've told Rich.
The only other thing I would add to that is if, just thinking of the neighbors, if you could swap the development, it might be a little bit more. If you do the middle site first, I don't know if there's a reason why you're doing it from one end to the other, but.
How would that,
Well, with Walsh's next door, you'd still maintain the tree buffer until at least the second round.
The town owns that property in between, so, that's, and whatever buffer is there, it was skin dry a long time ago, so. I think back when the Russos originally owned it prior to the dentist across the street who I bought it off. So that section really hasn't grown back.
No.
And again, their landscaping operation as well, like it's a true residential.
I was thinking that the trees on the site that we're looking at now would stay until you cleared it for the second round of development, right? If you develop the middle lot first.
I'm really not interested in that, to be honest with you.
Gary, anything else?
No, I'm good.
Chad?
Looks
No.
good.
Rich, anything else you'd want to add?
Peter? In this case,
Apologies, Peter.
he would be sitting on a special permit, that's why I asked.
Okay, yeah, all right. Yeah. There you have it.
One last question. Given the fact that I have drainage off-site, I do not need a stormwater permit?
I don't think so. I don't think so either. Rich?
You might-
Tying into the town,
Yeah.
Stormwater drainage system on the north side.
I don't know, maybe file for a storm, maybe, I don't know.
This
Let
is
me-
all pre-existing, everything
Yeah.
that's here is pre-existing?
I'm not sure what you... Sorry, I'm not sure.
The system you're showing, for the stormwater.
The stormwater system is pre-existing, has been,
Yeah, but
Well, you'll be below on, right.
has
How big's the
been
lot?
checked by engineers for capacity, and
That's
there's
almost
not a
it.
problem with him tying into it. He has
Tying into
permission
it,
from the
okay.
town to do so, as a matter
You
of
mean
fact.
on the site, is
Yeah, on
there
the site.
manholes, things like that?
Yeah.
No, there is not. And answer your question, Rich, the entire site is 111,000 square
Yeah,
feet.
right, okay.
It's roughly 33, 34, 30, it's all under, say, 35,000.
The one thing you will need, though, is the waiver from the regs on the, but as far as it relates to stormwater under the site plan regs, because the regs require the, on-site.
Right.
So that's not the case here, because so you would need a waiver on that.
Okay.
But
I just want to know which special permits and things like that we needed in there.
Yeah. How much? Now, there was a hit. So what was the earth removal? I'm trying to think about that. Kind of goes way back.
I have an earth removal plan on file for the entire site. It would obviously change.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll be,
So you may-
it'll be substantially less.
Okay. But it's still above the 500 cubic.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
do a septic system.
Right. So you. earth
There's a number you
removal-
guys should look into too when you get making
Yeah.
your list in the future.
So we would need an earth removal permit because that one probably lapsed.
Right.
But
So there's some requirement that runoff, is all the runoff caught with the system that's here, that's shown?
it's being, well, caught, I guess you will. It's going to be piped and caught with catch
Yeah,
basins
so
into the
it's
town
all
system.
channeled to those basins.
Yeah, the town system.
Correct, right.
The town system, yeah.
As opposed to everything being captured and maintained on site.
Part of my agreement with the town, Gary, because it was well before you were involved, is they are taking up to 92,000 square feet of impervious surface. I'm not coming anywhere close to that. But that was the agreement that was made back in 2004.
It was part of the arrangement for donating that land for the potential road that was gonna go in there.
Okay.
Tied to the bridge.
Named by Rob Garrity as the Bridge to Nowhere.
All right, Peter, thank you.
I appreciate your time, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, sitting in the back, patiently waiting is the gentleman for Norway Farms.
I don't know if you ever see the bond reduction
I think-
summary?
I think we have this
This is your
package
packet?
in your package.
Yeah. It was an email previously, but it's also a hard copy in there.
Okay.
Okay, so, the request is for reduction from 290,391 to 221,631, is that correct?
That is what Steve from Tetra Tech was asking for.
Yep.
And I asked him to revisit a couple of items.
Well, we got to do the microphone, don't forget, for folks at home.
I'm Rob Kane from Norway Farms Drive. So those are the numbers that Tetra Tech had come up with. And I had asked him to revisit a couple of items. One was the Cape Cod berm, that on this bond quote, he has it $19,250.
Yeah.
And the other one is the rehandled topsoil down near the bottom at $18,550.
Yep.
And if I could pass these out, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I only printed 5.
Give one to Rich. John and I will look
What do
up.
you want the vote from?
Give it to John.
You only need 3 votes.
John and I can look. All right, you give it to John.
We can share.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
We'll take one back for the file.
Oh, I got one left.
Oh, all right.
So the Cape Cod berm,
So the two items that I had were, that I had asked Steve to revisit, was the Cape Cod berm.
Yeah.
And then the rehandled topsoil. And if you go to the second page, which was back from January. The Cape Cod berm, it was the same amount, lineal footage, at 8,750. So it's gone up almost $10,000.
Yeah,
or
$5
more.
a foot versus $11 a foot. So
Yeah. And, that obviously when he does this calculation, he, takes into the current pricing and all that. I'm aware of that. And the same thing happened with the rehandled topsoil. So I had sent him a letter.
Rid of that, Rob?
I'm sorry?
He got rid of the rehandled topsoil?
No, he hasn't.
Price changed.
Yeah, the price went up,
from 13.2 to
substantially went up.
from 13.2.
What is rehandled topsoil, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I think what he's calculating in there is the fact that I need screened loam to put down on the grass strips on the town right away.
Yep.
So the third page was a letter that I had sent to him down near the bottom. I asked him about revisiting the monolithic berm and the rehandled topsoil. And up at the top, as far as the berm goes, he said usually by the end of the project, the berm needs to be replaced. So, I'd pointed out to him before that, and he's been on site, that this is the monolithic berm that's fused as part of the roadway, not Cape Cod berm. And I have a loader that's the same size that does the center of town, DiMartino has. It's a 966. I drive over the berm all the time, and in the snow I've clipped it a couple of times and it's fine. So the last part on the berm that I pointed out to him, and this is the last page, if you're still with me,
Yep.
was my contract from Titan that again goes back a couple of years ago. When they first put the road in, that berm was put down for $4,680. And then the note that I had was I'd also gotten a price from Aggregate, and they were going to charge me $3,200 to put the berm in. And what I had asked Steve to do was, recalculate the berm more as when I put down the top coat at like $2 a square foot at the 1,700, which would be 3,500. And I still don't think it would come up to the numbers that I'd originally have to spend because the depth that they have to put in at the edge. You're, 2.5 inches of the regular roadway, and then they build it up another 4. So on just that portion, if there's any way that the board
Yeah.
could help reduce that number.
What, if DPW were doing it, what would they charge, Rich?
I don't know, it depends what their bids are. I don't know what the bid price is for this work. So that, I don't know.
Well, they
off the top
sum
of
it
my head.
all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but
Prevailing wage.
We've
Yeah.
yet to modify a
Could I-
bond reduction that DPW recommended.
this isn't the DPW recommendation, though.
Was Tetra Tech?
Yeah,
On the second one, the adjusted
I agree
one,
with you,
Well,
but
then where's DPW's recommendation?
I think that the rehandled topsoil for screening it, put it down as a fair price. That's what we're buying the topsoil now for, and spreading roughly. And if you put your Cape Cod berm initially saying it was going down at the first coat and then a new one at the second, that's why it's double. But with the monolithic, it doesn't go down until you finish the street and everything's done. So there's gonna be no disturbance with the Cape Cod berm.
Well, we're not doing Cape Cod.
Oh, monolithic,
We
same
have the
thing.
monolithic,
I
but
mean,
all I have
I'm
to
using
do-
them interchangeably, but he lowered the price in half, because the higher price was because he thought you put it down at the first coat, and then it gets damaged. But you're not putting it down at the first coat.
Yes, it's already all installed now, it's the binder.
Oh, you did?
You
The
did.
berm too?
Yes, all the way around the road, John.
The monolithic berm's supposed to go on with the second coat.
Right, but with the open drainage, I chose to put it down now
Oh, okay.
to be able to control the erosion.
Okay.
So my point to Steve at Tetra Tech was that when we go to put the final coat down, we'd only have to put the top coat over the existing monolith, which would be the rate that I just paid and granted it was binder, but I was paying about $2 a square foot. So if you,
Steve really shouldn't be giving us two sets of pricing. He's supposed to get this by posted rates and give us
Well,
rates and numbers, you know?
he did, but
I know.
he's talking about having to tear it all out and redo it, which I just don't understand the,
Yeah.
Well, these differ by a month, right? December,
no,
No,
the year,
they're-
12 months.
11 months.
yes, 11 months, excuse me, 11 months, yeah.
I guess I would just offer the idea of running, run it through DPW just to kind of. I'm sure you want it done tonight, right?
No, not at all. I'm not in any hurry.
So I'm wondering
So
maybe
we're-
just
we're
talk
pretty-
it over with DPW to.
All right, so you're happy with the rest of the numbers? It's just those, it's just those two that you're
Yep.
questioning?
The rehandled topsoil.
Yeah,
At the end of our cul-de-sac right now, there's a huge pile, there's at least, if not more, than 2,000 yards of screen loam that we screened this fall.
yeah,
So the material's already on site.
yeah.
And where the right-of-way is, you have 13 feet where the drainage swale is.
Mhm.
And then there's the grass strip, sidewalk, and then there's another couple of feet that you need to do.
Yeah.
So we've already completed the grass strip, and that's probably the most labor-intensive because you have to dig out all the overage
Yeah.
from when you put the sidewalk in.
Mhm.
And then it's a lot more delicate putting loam back in. So that's already in and rough graded. And so I don't know if there's, the loam's on way more loam than what we need to do the right-of-way with.
And what are you gonna do with the excess?
Well, I'll use it around the open space banks and for the lawns, and
Yep.
I still have another pile that's the same size.
Okay.
In his defense, Rob, he has to price this out, assuming that, not to say it's happening, if that loom is all gone, because you used it on houses, but at the time of the grass strips, that's what he has to worry about, not that it's there now, that's why.
I completely understand
So that's
his
his
position,
method.
but I just
Yeah.
wanted to, there's enough money for me to work with to get more parts of this project, but it also requires me having to have him come back at an hourly rate to go over the bond again.
Yeah.
Or we can approve it
So-
at what's written here.
I'm sorry?
I said, or we can approve it at what's written here.
Yeah, that too.
If he's not in a
Well,
rush, look at DPW.
I'm not in a
Yeah,
hurry. I mean,
if you're not in any hurry, then let's take Rich's suggestion, have DPW look at the Cape Cod berm number, right?
Which is like, what?
Right?
No, I mean,
Yes, no?
no, I did suggest that.
You did
I didn't
say-
think I thought you were not thinking that was a.
No, I was.
And
I
then they
was-
won't charge him an engineering rate.
My question, I guess my question was, are you looking for this to be voted on and addressed this evening? Or do you want to get these numbers corrected and then come back and vote on
Well,
it next month?
yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be tonight. Okay.
If it was,
I'm okay
if
to
it
wait
was
next
tonight,
month.
we'd vote on what's here on the piece of paper.
Okay.
If you could wait another month,
Yep.
then there's a chance that the number could be smaller.
Or you could vote on this and next month come back with the corrections.
Right.
Yeah, that's another possibility,
Third
that's
option,
true, Aaron.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you
So-
looking for tonight?
Yeah,
Do you want us
so-
to
Well,
vote on this as is?
I don't think that I wasn't looking for you to completely roll back everything to a nominal amount. But if you were to, put the Cape Cod berm maybe at $10,000, you are probably getting 3 times what you need to finish that. And
But we can't do that, Rob. but
you can't.
DPW
Okay, that's
Yeah, I
fine.
don't- right.
Nope, that's fine. That's all I was
Let them
asking.
do it, and bring it back next month.
Okay.
If you got the time, we'll do it next month.
Okay, so, and that, Rich, are you okay with doing that with the highway department? I don't really feel like spending more money with Tetra
I
Tech
don't blame you.
to have them go over it.
No, my thought was to go to DPW, not
Okay.
Tetra Tech.
Okay,
I mean, they've laid it out for the town.
yep,
Okay. So we'll see you next month.
that's fine.
Great.
Super.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Rob.
You're welcome. Okay, endorse KP middle school site plans. Do we have the plans, or are we still waiting?
No, we don't.
We
So
don't-
that's-
Okay, we don't do
scratch
that then.
Okay.
Preserve at Keeney Pond, request for curbing modification.
Scratch that.
I really can't.
Someone is recusing himself, right?
Two.
Two of you are recusing, okay.
Two.
All right, John, one, two, for the record, the highway department, I guess I watched the meeting.
You gotta do the mic, sorry.
Yes, it's only for the people at home.
The highway department contacted me, and I guess I didn't come to the last meeting, but I did watch it, and I guess they're not wanting slope granite put anymore. So I have one street left in my subdivision that calls for slope granite, so he asked me if I would put in the modification for them to change it to monolithic berm. So that's why I'm here.
All right.
It doesn't really matter either way to me. We built this for slope curbing, so
Yeah.
by doing monolithic berm, I actually have to go widen both sides of the street 2 feet. So the cost is probably actually more this way.
Yeah, yeah.
The monolithic berm.
It's the way to go for the town, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this 5, 6, 7 years ago, Walter, and the old board kept denying it, but it's a lot cleaner look.
Yep, yep, agreed. Okay, so we need a motion to make a,
Oh.
sorry? What?
Audience?
Well,
It's not a minor modification of a plan or something?
so this is step one. We have to let people know. So we have to follow what we just did with Ariana. We just got done letting the residents. So, sorry, but.
We have to publish,
No.
Have a public hearing?
Remember with Ariana Way?
Yeah.
We sent notice to all the abutters to let them know.
oh,
that
that's what you're
the
talking about.
request is
All right.
being made and that, yeah. Well, you sound like you're ready to make a motion to vote.
I was,
Right,
but,
that's what I was just
I
saying.
was,
That's-
but you headed me
He
off
was making a
correctly.
motion to notify the neighbors.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, yeah, okay. Well, my apologies, that was the motion.
No, you're right, you're right.
Right.
I would,
So,
all right, fair enough. So that does not require a motion to do what you suggest we need to do.
no, I know. I'm just saying that.
Fair enough.
You would.
So
vote
we will
on
do
it.
that, and then next meeting, we will vote on the change, right?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Understood. Thank you, John.
Is four enough, Rich? Four is.
What's that? Oh, 3. So it's a subdivision, so it's a definitive, so we only need 3 members. Yeah, and so you're okay to, yeah.
Thank-
Couldn't vote.
Thanks for keeping me honest,
day.
okay.
The only person I actually mentioned in type of curbing was Sean Dooley, but he bought a lot from me way back, but I never mentioned that to you, Chad, correct? No.
No.
And I did talk with Sean, because
Yeah.
he did prefer that, and I told him he was welcome to come tonight, but he said
Yeah.
it doesn't matter to him.
Yeah,
that
okay,
much,
fair
so.
enough,
But
yeah.
you can contact him for next time.
Okay,
Yeah,
yep.
just,
You want me to pay for the postage? Never mind.
But there's, what, 5 of us?
Next.
Moving along,
moving along.
Mill River Heights, Ariana Lane, sign insurance bond, waiting
yeah,
for.
so we don't have it for you to sign, so I have.
We don't have
no
it to
action
sign.
tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Meeting minutes
Motion to
review,
approve meeting minutes as submitted.
which one?
December 10th,
Number 10th.
2019.
Okay, and presume you have scrutinized this and are happy with it, huh?
Endlessly.
Endlessly, fair enough, okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Town planner update. By the way, I have one item to put on the end of the agenda. So don't think that we get to.
11:30.
I know, it's 10:30. 11:30, that's over in the Maritimes up in Canada. Town planner updates. Town planner, update us.
All right. In the interest of the hour of the night, but the B1 committee met January 6th, and I think
I saw your notes.
the results of the meeting was to hold off on taking any of the B1 zoning to town meeting in May. Couple things happened that helped to, April?
You're right.
May. So, a couple things. One, MAPC forwarded comments to Josh Fiala from MAPC. He's going to make some of the edits to the report, the final report. And the goal actually, Aaron, which I didn't say it now, I'll tell you, is to get this done by the end of January, so the report can be published, the public can take a look at it. And then we did receive additional funding from Mass Housing to continue on with Josh to, look at the bylaw, the things that we discussed, but also provide more information about the purpose and intent of it, and kind of do that public piece a little bit more than we weren't able to get to, kind of hit on the back, towards the end of the process.
Yep.
In November. So,
So when do you bring it back again?
right now is the fall.
Did you get some money to investigate
Did.
something in the town as well? Like water or?
I didn't get to that yet, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I
All right,
thought that was all part
yeah,
of the
that was,
decision.
Let me ask you a question on the design specs.
Mhm.
I had a chance to read through those. Those are pretty decent, very complete, make a big difference. How does that work about working them in? Do we make that a part of our suggested recommendations? Do we make it a regulation of the planning board, which means we vote on it? Or do we make it part of the bylaws or what? How does that, what is the authority gonna be on that? Because that's pretty much done, right?
Yes, although it is aligned to the recommendations that are being made, so it might have to be modified if the modifications are made. But I think the request, the MAPC's recommendation was that they be a voluntary guideline for the town.
Voluntary.
So, wouldn't necessarily be a requirement, but it would be an outline for a developer to understand what the town is looking for and what the town's expectations are.
Does that give us the ability to insist on some of these things rather than the whole package?
I think we gotta talk that through. I mean,
Because that's what I'm thinking.
design review board is a requirement for development, for site plan approval process, so as long as something gets kicked into the site plan approval process and goes to the design board has the right to do whatever they want.
Yeah, but
in terms of-
there's no authority for the applicant. The design review board brings a recommendation to planning board, and then we.
Right, but the design review board can make the recommendations
Right.
to align with the guidelines, which the
Right.
planning board could choose to support or not
Right.
support, depending on
Okay.
the developer.
And if we choose to support it, can they override that? Because
think
it's
so.
not,
They
because
can't
it's not a
ignore it.
regulation.
Once we make a recommendation, they can't ignore it. There's enough.
If we make it as part of our site plan approval or special permit process or whatever the right, as long as it's my understanding is, as long as it's a formal request by the board, then
That was my question. Can we put that into the site plan
I don't,
approval?
we should probably find out the legality of that statement.
Right.
Yeah, we should, I think, yeah, you're right.
Because if it has no teeth.
No
then-
teeth is, I mean, it's,
So
That's
on that,
something you could, where you kind of fix it until all the B1 changes are done, right? You may have to modify that.
so one potential approach to that, which I'll talk with Josh, we'll talk it through a design review, is what I'd like to have is design review, they're gonna review it, and if it seems like what's there is what we wanna see effectively that's what we wanna go by, those design guidelines, then I'd like to have it both ends, actually. The planning board, we can incorporate into the site plan regulations, and then we're not gonna we won't be at town meeting in May, but I think I'd like to tee it up so it's embedded into the design bylaw,
Yeah, why
provisions of the
couldn't-
zoning bylaw.
Why couldn't you bring that up in May, and then, based on whether the B1 changes happen or not, modify it at that time?
I think the logic behind it is if it's not part of the bylaws, it doesn't need to be voted on by the town, right, which is step one. There's still a way
Right.
to make it an expected requirement.
If it's one of our regulations, then we go through and we post it, we have a public hearing in 30 days, and then we vote. And then it's got teeth.
Yeah. But I think the thought is that could all happen after we deal with whatever zoning changes are or are not
Because I think
covered.
some of these things really make a difference, and I think that if the bylaws don't happen in the fall, these some of these things should still carry forward with all the work done and the whole overall look.
Yeah, you just may have to change it, right? Like, they're
Right,
all based
right.
on a 3-story building.
I
If the
understand.
bylaws don't go through, you
Right.
gotta cut it back to a 2.5-story
Right,
building.
yeah.
Yes, I'd like to explore trying to move them up sooner, that they're
Exactly.
adopted, acknowledged, and they're utilized.
Right.
We'll talk that through with the design review board too, but I don't want to necessarily wait. It seems like they're good guidelines for right now,
I
right?
wouldn't think you're not gonna have substantial changes if you have a tweaking on the zoning, correct? On those design review things, on those, new specs? Would anything change substantially?
Well, you couldn't approve them the way they're written because they don't align with the existing zoning guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the,
So you'd have to change them to align with the zoning guidelines, only to change them again after you change the zoning guidelines in the fall.
Yeah, that's extra time.
it may be, if things are aligning, we could talk it through, but, like,
How much money did you get for Josh?
what's that?
How much money extra did you get for Josh?
29,000?
One thing to note for the B1 committee, when it comes time, be it the spring or the fall,
It's definitely not the spring, so.
when it
I mean,
comes
not
time to
2020.
present this stuff to the town meeting, it's the B1 committee that's gonna stand up and present it. It's not gonna be the planning board. These are not planning board sponsored, they're planning board recommended or supported, but it's the B1 committee that's putting them forward. So,
Well, we talked about the B1 zoning committee speaking to the requirements, but I believe that the planning board has to make the request to the select
the
board.
planning board will recommend approval, but
I think the legality might have to be checked, Walter, whether it has to be a formal board or whether it could be a backup. I'm not
fair
sure
enough, fair
myself.
enough. But if it's the planning board that's going to stand up and sponsor these, I'm gonna be sick that day. So I'm just telling you.
Those two potential pathways with this. The B1, and that was discussed at the meeting in the beginning of January, needs to be kind of the champions and make the pitch to the changes. The planning board's still gonna have to, it doesn't necessarily have to be the planning board, I suppose. It could be another
Well, the planning,
municipal body, but.
the planning board they would come here and as they have before, and we would talk about, do we vote to support this one, or do we vote to support that one? Do we vote to, and we would have that information available when the moderator says, what is the planning board's position on this? The planning board would say, we support this, we support that, we don't support, whatever it would be.
Yeah.
You might want to have an action on this bundling versus no bundling, because when initially it come out as a bundle zoning group,
Well,
and I think it was changed at the selectmen's, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, there'll be a whole update on what the warrant items are, which we'll get to you guys, you all. Picking up on what Rich is saying, I think there's a couple of things I just add to that. There are some changes that we're gonna need to discuss to those warrant items. And I think the one thing that we talked about doing but did not do was doing a better job of getting out in front of a variety of the different boards and committees.
Yes.
To get
Yeah.
basically support before we go to the advisory committee.
Yeah.
Not sure if everybody knows that we actually have a new member of the advisory committee on the board,
Mhm.
Susan Klein. So
That'll be a
we
big help.
we lost our member of the advisory committee last year, so we didn't really there was no one sort of keeping the advisory board up to date as we were going along. So that's been changed. We actually have a meeting with the advisory board coming up so that we can have an open conversation with them. We're hoping Josh can make a presentation of his final report at that time. We're gonna have another public meeting, at least one, if not more. So there's, we're addressing the public's concerns that maybe it was a little bit rushed the first time and trying to do a better job of getting our ducks in a row.
To get back to Walter's point, you're really the only person that has background on what the content is, and you have quite a diverse group of people. You have someone from Recreation Department, Eileen's from Board of Health. is there an expectation that these people are getting up and presenting the content around B1 changes?
I think the way we talked about at the last meeting was similar to how the advisory board tackles their warrant items, right? So,
Well, they just kind of read a bullet at the town meeting. But
Right.
isn't
But
there a
if-
point
but-
where someone's defending something? and
through
questions are asked?
through the moderator, if someone asks questions, they will be directed to someone to answer.
Or someone else steps up at that time?
Right, but
Yes, okay.
in all I think the plan is that someone on the board would be responsible for each warrant item, and they would be the ones that would speak to it.
Okay.
So I guess the answer is yes. The hope is that each member of the board will take a warrant item to speak to at town meeting.
Well, we have,
Each member of your board?
Each
have
member
some-
of the committee,
we have
sorry,
some high
of the B1
expertise
zoning
here.
committee.
Okay.
To Walter's point,
Okay.
the B1 zoning, we talked about the B1 zoning committee having a table at town meeting similar to how the
Right.
advisory board has a table.
Yep.
So that we could talk, and the same way the advisory board talks to the warrant, we would be talking to the zoning changes
Okay.
that are being proposed.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
And part of the,
I don't have to be sick.
no. And part of the funding, what we got with Josh is to be able to do a better job, to be able to communicate more information out regarding what the changes are about, the intent. So
Sure.
some of that piece that we weren't able to do.
is
that-
Josh gonna present it? At
Yeah.
town meeting?
Yeah, he is funded to be able to be at town meeting. I think the overall goal, though, is that, like, hopefully, that it gets to the end of the road, is that the B1 committee is really, they make presentations why this is important, and it comes from the committee
Mhm.
and not Josh. He could be there
Yep.
more as a tech, and same for myself. It's really,
Yep.
the role of the committee to kind of get behind him. And so there are some aspects of the proposed changes that we're going to revisit too. So, so it's not, I don't want to tell you that it's just take what was held off in November. It's coming back exactly the way it was, because there was some feedback, there was some valuable information gained all the way to
You may recall at the last town meeting, Peter got up and spoke about his opposition to the changed articles. I hope that that speech was captured somewhere so that you have information about what the objections were, and you could hopefully work to mitigate those. But
Did you ever
anyway.
get in touch with some of the dissenters at the last meeting that, there was?
Some I did, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Are they going to be involved in your meetings at all, or no?
The public is invited to every meeting that we have.
They're always invited, but I think we
Yeah.
did talk, so we
Yeah.
had, so Josh is I'm gonna have a refined scope of work that I'll be able to share with you, with the guts of what we're talking about to get an idea of it. But we had the notion of having maybe some smaller meetings too.
Okay.
That kind of availability, but we're trying to figure out a
I
responsive
understand.
way to,
And I think all that's fine. My point was just that Peter had a particular speech that he gave at the
no, I
time.
have it, it's on tape from town meeting.
Good.
And I know I did, at least the point he was making about the housing was really 40B related
Yeah.
at the legislative level, so.
All right.
And the second item, which
Keep going, yeah.
is we were awarded a housing choice grant to do the wastewater master plan for Norfolk Center, which will take a look at the wastewater plant that we do have and the possibility of expanding, utilizing some of the unused capacity for Norfolk Center for other, for at least the properties that are connected to the system right now, but then expanding out to some of the other properties that would like to potentially have the opportunity to have sewer for development and redevelopment.
Yeah.
So some of the pieces of it, and I'm working on a scope. So Woburn and Kern was the engineering firm that was selected to do the study work for the town. They're working on revising, tweaking the scope a little bit and front-loaded more, which is more of analysis of the plant, alternative analysis, and then present those to the town to consider options. And then based on, and there'll be public meetings, there're gonna be some build-out analysis work as part of that study, and then make a presentation to the, different town officials and the public about possible options to consider. At the same time, we will be looking at funding options that are available to fund this infrastructure, and not, grants and so forth. But also be able to, which is probably critically important, is if we get additional capacity available to other properties, have some kind of framework where it can be, and I don't have the answer to this, I'm hoping we could do this, is to have a system that, one person doesn't utilize all that additional unused capacity for one site, and, some equity to distribution of capacity.
Can you use the capacity to solve the problems that you might have in the B1 district, like focus on 40B in specific areas, or just to, can you use it to close deals, or is that, am I?
Well, there was one fellow who came in here looking for a proposal to build a building next to the Dunkin' Donuts. He owns Dunkin' Donuts. And as he said, if he had sewer available to him, he could build a larger building.
Yeah.
So he's decided to wait until we figure out what we're
I was just thinking of him as well, but
Yeah.
I was more thinking of 40B as well.
You may know better than me, Gary, but I watched the Board of Health meeting. It looks to me like they're gonna be adjusting the gallonage required. That's the feel I got from
Up
the
or
talk.
down?
Down to the regular, the 40B level, state level, which means that the septic fields will now be 2/3 of the size that they currently have to be. They were reading it and going, but I think the agent was for it. And if I were to guess, after listening to that discussion, I would guess that they're gonna change it and get rid of all the extra 50% requirement for a garbage
Garbage
disposal.
disposal, yeah. I
Which changes
heard that
everything.
part.
That changes everything.
Yep.
So that would be the same sewer requirements that 40Bs have. Same thing. So the space you could occupy on a lot would be
More, yeah.
same as the 40B. Less zoning restricted.
Rich, quick update to the board on Southwood. The guys from Texas backed out, right?
Did?
They did, yeah. It's not good. It's actually St. Louis, but that's all right.
Same what?
Well, it was St. Louis, but.
I thought it was Texas.
That's all right. It's down there. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, they did, and so the town as a whole kind of need to revisit the approach with the property. The impediment, or I shouldn't say impediment, but the thing that's come to the surface that's become a ongoing concern is that there's the deed restriction on the hospital use of the property. And so when you market properties and you look to attract people that are outside the region, the notion of lifting a deed restriction that has to go through the legislature can be a.
Well, why isn't that being
Being done
pursued
now.
by the archdiocese right now?
So it's part the archdiocese, it's part us to a degree. We're kind of partners to it, the town. Because I think if I was the legislator, we'll take our local rep, right? Yeah, the archdiocese is gonna push it, he's gonna look back to the town, right, where the town stands on it.
And the
because-
town, I would think, would be cheering, yes, yes, do it, get rid of it.
Exactly.
Right. Makes
Why
it more,
wouldn't you start on it?
makes
I
the
mean,
property more marketable.
I worked on this thing for 3 years with this guy from New Jersey. I never heard of that restriction at the time.
That was always like an easy thing to be done, remember? I thought that was just easy. Give it to our state rep and put it through.
Anyway, okay, thank you for that. I pontificated, I should.
So the site cleanup wasn't a major detractor, it was.
No, so
It
now,
would take $7 million to take down the building.
so the other piece of the development of the Southwood property is that the development proposal from New Jersey had, depends how you wanna look at this, but required level of cleanup to residential standards. Which means, up by the hospital site, you gotta clean it up. They have to be able to, the other developers look at it as a possibility that you could have residential, but more commercial potentially, light industrial up at the hospital site, which this is a lower level as far as cleanup goes because people aren't living there. So you can approach the cleanup a little bit differently than a residential level because it's, you gotta take down the building, there's the landfill that's there, the oil spill, so.
And the water.
And the water is, there's a lot of, it's not an easy site to develop by any means, because there isn't.
Is there anyone sniffing around?
There is, yep. But
So what is the town doing about removing the deed restrictions, if the town has something to do with it?
so we're gonna congregate as a in-house, I guess, if you will, kind of and vet out the essentially the findings, if you will, which is that the overall cost to try to clean the property up to have residential on that original proposal that people have seen, if you haven't seen it, is probably not feasible from a development standpoint. So the development proposals are a mix of light industrial.
What does that have to do with the town's next action?
What does that have to
The
do
deed
with it?
restrictions,
Because
is that
there's,
what you're talking about?
well, because the zoning doesn't, some of the uses that they would like to do as far as light industrial aren't under the present zoning bylaw for that zone right now.
But it doesn't make it look a difference if we change the zoning if the deed restriction doesn't go away.
No, I understand that, but they're companions to each other. So if there's support by the town in this new, I call it different direction, so to speak, to develop the property, that allows us to move, to get the deed restriction.
Whose vote to the town to get the deed restriction process started? Whose vote, the selectmen?
I don't know, I have to find out for sure, I know.
I think one of the big hopes there.
So here's the fundamental concern, I think, for some people, so I'll play devil's advocate to you and the rest, is that when you remove the deed restriction, if you don't have things in place, then there's no more restriction on the property and an encumbrance, so what could go in there? I think, I think that's the concern about how you sequence things about removing the deed. So for example, we're not at 40B, we're not at 10% right now. You remove the deed restriction, clicks along, nothing happens, materializes, then somebody comes in with a much larger scale 40B project because there is no encumbrance on the property. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. That's what I've heard. Some of the concern about just lifting it.
But they do want to utilize, in general, the town wants to utilize that area to get their affordable ratio up, right?
They do.
It's a-
Yeah. Yes.
It's
Yes.
seen as one of the key areas that can help do that.
It is. It is. So I'm not, but at the same time, we're also, there are 40B projects that if they go through the permitting process, we start to approach 10%. We're getting much closer to 10%. So the scale of a project that we need there might be changing a little bit for the short term and longer term. That's what I'm just saying. So when you guys all first started on it, there wasn't the 40B projects that were before the Board of Appeals.
Yep.
So, when they look at it, the people who look at it, none of them are they're not housing people, so they have to partner with somebody to do the 40B development, whatever it may be, right? So that's about scale and quantity and units, so that's why we need to be careful, meticulous about it, that's all. Because, like I said to you, they may want to see 200 or 300 units there. Now, I don't know if that's the right fit or not for the town. Maybe because we may not necessarily need 300 units of housing there, to get to 10%. If you continuously work towards maintaining your affordability, you know, you might have overextended yourself in what you need to get there, so. That's the,
Okay, one last thing on the agenda. Thank you for that update. We touched earlier on a site walk for 6 Hill Street. Could you take the charge of finding time when we could all do that?
sure.
Sometime in the near future, so we could all go up there and tromp around the site?
When we're doing that, do you also want to walk
201.
Peter Chipman's property?
Yeah, we could do that.
201.
We could do that together, or we do that individually, or whatever.
Right.
you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I could do it the same day, or
Yeah,
whatever.
we could do it the same day.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.
Is somebody taking this?
I hope so.
Yes.
All right.
They're still going.
Yes, they're still alive back there. All right, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.